all rise, and if you can't face the flag, use your hats to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So, historic night, our first meeting in this new Carl Schultz Pioneer Room, commonly known as the Pioneer Room. Welcome, everyone. We'll begin with guest comments. We do allow per speaker 3 minutes. There's open any time, and we need to keep time so that we're fair to everyone. And we will allow up to 30 minutes of guest comments. And that's aside from the special guest speaker. So, did everyone sign in that wants to speak? Andrew Kuhlenberg, do you want to speak to a specific topic?
Yes.
Jeannie wants to speak to a specific topic. Jeff Swanson. Sampson. Jeff Swanson. You are speaking to one of the specific topics also. Jeff Sampson? Do you want to speak now or do you want to speak before the topic?
Whatever's easiest for the board.
Pardon me?
So whatever's easiest for the board. You guys want to speak now or later?
Why don't you speak? If you'll speak now, that'd be great.
Sure. Will you go first?
Okay, so Andrew Kuhlenberg.
Sure. Hi, I'm Andrew Kuhlenberg. I'm from Jacksonport. I have friends and family that work at the school. And I'm here in regards to the agenda item referring to the discussion of mandating vaccines for Sevastopol staff. First and foremost, this is about personal rights, rights that should never be infringed upon. Almost all prescription drugs and treatments have a risk-reward component. Patients take these into consideration, and as individuals, choose what treatment they think is best for them. They always have a choice. Not so long ago, there were essential workers, and they were overwhelmingly praised for their courage and commitment. After all, healthcare workers, police officers, first responders, and teachers consisted of the front lines, the most exposed and at risk. They did this day after day, week after week, month after month, for well over a year. They asked for no guarantees, had no vaccine, and knew the dangers. They disregarded their own safety and did this all willingly. Schools, more specifically, were at higher risk. Why? As per the CDC, the top 3 most important protocols to stop the spread of viruses are as follows. 1, stay home when you are sick and avoid close contact with people who are or could be sick. If you ask teachers in the school setting, these 2 things unfortunately happen all the time. 2, avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Why? Because germs spread this way, they say. That factor has been greatly exacerbated considering kids and teachers touch their eyes, nose, and mouth considerably more when dealing with masks. And the 3rd protocol, keep clean surfaces and objects. Clean and disinfect frequently all touch surfaces at work or school. I'm confident the staff did the best that they could in that regard, but again, in a school setting, it's nearly impossible. Considering the massive exposure to all 3 of the top contributing factors, combined with the prolonged amount of time exposed to these components, one can only assume, and studies show, that presumably the majority of teachers have either had exposure and recovered, or have been exposed and were non-symptomatic, which happens more than you think. The remainder, considering available access, I can only assume have been vaccinated. Either way, these individuals have acquired natural immunity. Studies in Israel, the most vaccinated population with accurate recorded data, absolutely shows natural immunity to be an equal, if not more robust defense against COVID-19 and variants.
30 seconds.
As a society, we are extremely concerned with cases, deaths, and spread. But why aren't we enthusiastically counting the estimated 100 million plus in this country alone who have been infected but recovered? Shouldn't that be a huge part of this process? Surely that's something everyone can celebrate. It almost seems reckless to not acknowledge. Now a good number of these fine people around the country who were last year's heroes and who worked through the pandemic are being sent a message. You're not that essential. We no longer care about your commitment and self-sacrifice.
Time's up.
And it doesn't, can I defer my time from somebody else? I'm going to finish here. I have 20 seconds. We are not concerned if you've recovered and had immunity, or that you may have reservations about the safety of the treatment that was approved in record time and has caused deaths and permanent disability in others. Your religious convictions mean nothing. You'll either accept this treatment or you'll go from heroes to being unemployed. In light of all that was mentioned, and considering as of August 6th,
Thank you, Mr.
Director
Gilbert.
Michelle
Yes, cut you
Lewinsky
off.
stated what the vaccines can't do is stop the spread of the infection. I'm almost done, one paragraph. Then why would anyone think disenfranchising such a large group would be a good idea? To me, it seems obvious. It's for the board.
Mr.
If the board
Davian.
were to entertain this mandate, it would inevitably result in loss of staff that would ultimately hurt students, the school, and the community. I sincerely hope the
I
board
can't read
takes
the next
these
statement,
and all
Mr.
important
Davian.
factors into consideration when discussing, because this is a
Mr.
big deal
Gilbert.
for a lot of people.
Please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I cannot read the next statement. It looks like
I
a
guess I think
statement.
point of order. I really don't want to have cat calls back and forth. I think we're all here to give an opinion. If you don't like what the opinion is, then keep it to yourself that you don't like it.
Can we
I just heard a
respect the
boom.
time limit?
I'm sorry. We're all neighbors, and we're here to listen. We're not here to debate back and forth, okay? So everybody has a right to
The
their
boo is
opinion.
perhaps for me, Jerry. I have to keep order in the meeting or we will have
No,
chaos.
I'm talking about there was a boo to his comment and another person in the crowd.
Well, that's inappropriate either, so.
Sorry.
My apologies. I had so much to say.
I cannot read the next,
Thank
I
you.
cannot read the next name. It looks like DDQ.
No, that's probably me.
Oh, Derek, stand
But I
up.
would like to defer time.
He wanted to defer his time to me.
Yeah, I did that on weekend.
We didn't know.
Yeah.
We thought
But
that
you
was the
can
first
talk
time.
if you want.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can speak.
Do you have something that you want to say?
No, actually, I agree with Andrew.
Thank you. Mr. Jeff Sampson?
Hi guys. So the 7-day average of cases, active cases is 9. Active average is 0. 1 death in the last month. No new hospitalizations this week. So the school board goal number 3 is ensure that all communications, internal and external, are consistent, transparent, interactive, and they clearly articulate school functions and needs. And importantly, that they invite and reflect substantive community participation. My understanding is that the school board are elected representatives of the Sevastopol community at large, and most especially the parents and children that attend the school, with the stated aim to reflect the majority will of the community regarding education. So, unless we are in a situation where masking is being mandated by a higher elected authority than the school board, then surely the majority will of the community should direct the board's policies with regard to masking. So question, if the majority of parents wish their children to be masked, then we would expect to see that the children that have been coming to school are mostly masked, i.e. more than 50% of them are wearing a mask when they come to school. As this is clearly not been the case, then don't we already have a de facto referendum result on the issue of masking, at least as far as the parents' will is concerned in this matter? Okay? I do realise that on the board, a lot of you are under pressure from people who represent the medical community, but as we've already discussed several times in prior board meetings, the science is not clear-cut and is always changing. The narrow medical view that prioritises COVID numbers above everything else, ignoring the other health and social consequences that masking and vaccination may bring, is not truly in our child's best interest. I believe that I speak for that majority of parents who are not sending their kids to school with masks, who would ask you that you not overreach by removing their responsibility and freedom to make this very important health decision for their children, and instead vote to keep masking optional at Sevastopol.
30 seconds.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want you to know that we do hear what you have to say, and we do have to stay within the policies of how the meeting runs to keep it in order. This is an emotional topic for a lot of people, and we don't want to get out of order like some other schools have in their meetings. So be assured that there will be thoughtful discussion tonight on those topics. Would you like to introduce Mr.
Sure.
Stevens?
Thank you, Brian Stevens, the CEO of the North Medical Center, and he's part of this
can use the podium or you can talk or whatever you want.
I'll just stand here, sir, so agree with you. Thank you very much. My name is Brian Stevens. I'm the CEO at Door County Medical Center. I have with me here this evening Dr. Amy Fogarty, who's our Chief of Pediatrics, Ann Brettel, who's the Director of School Nursing, and Dr. Jim Heiss, who's our Chief Medical Officer. Appreciate you having us here tonight. I want to thank you for all the work that you've done to prepare for this school year and for giving the students in the Sevastopol School District the ability to attend school in person. I know our pediatricians have been supportive of in-person learning from the beginning, as we recognize that there is no better way to meet both the social and intellectual needs of the children and youth in our community. I want to share with you today some things that we're observing at the hospital in terms of volumes and COVID case rates within Door County. Dr. Fogarty and Dr. Heiss are also here to reiterate the importance of keeping students in school, both for their academic and their emotional health, as well as encourage you to take part in the data collection project with the ABC Science Group that Dr. Fogarty will talk about. I'll admit that I've been so busy, we've all been so busy at Door County Medical Center this summer that I've not fully paid attention to every decision that you've made with regard to COVID precautions. I assume from the comments that have been made from what I've read in the paper that Sevastopol is not currently requiring masking for students, teachers, and staff in school buildings. And I understand that we all wanted things to be able to return more back to normal this year. We had the same thing in the hospital. We were starting to relax our policies. We had hoped to be able to move back to much more normal operations than we experienced for much of the last year. Unfortunately, as the summer wore on, we started to see the cases rise. We also started to see a huge increase in inpatient volumes, and so we had to change some of our policies back as well. So I assume that there was an understanding going into the school year that if the situation changed, that the school would be willing to change policies in regard to that. I'm here this evening to assure you that I believe those additional safety measures are now necessary. Here's what we're seeing at the hospital. The number of active COVID cases in the community is hovering around, when I wrote this a couple of days ago, it was 230. Today, it's up to probably 260. We had 38 new positives just today in the community. That's the highest number we've seen since January or February. Most of those cases continue to be unvaccinated individuals, but vaccinated folks are also testing positive and spreading infection. That's led to enough community spread that we have consistently had 3 to 4 COVID positive inpatients in our facility at any given time for the past 2 months. 3 to 4 inpatients with one diagnosis is a manageable number during normal times. These are not abnormal times. We're as busy in the hospital today as we were back in the fall of last year at the height of the pandemic. We're regularly seeing more than 40 patients per day in our ER, which is a very high number for us, and our inpatient census has consistently been above 20 patients for the past 2 months. For reference, our legal capacity is 25 patients, but we have been allowed to exceed that capacity throughout the pandemic due to the emergency order. So the good news is that on average, we're only seeing 3 to 4 COVID positive inpatients at a time, almost all of which have been unvaccinated. But it has been enough to stress our staff and resources to the limits with no end in sight. Furthermore, every hospital in Wisconsin is currently at or near capacity, so we have little ability to transfer patients who have even severe needs that typically we would not treat at DCMC. What does any of this have to do with your school district? Several things, actually. First and foremost, when students have to quarantine, often parents have to be out of work, and we can't afford to have any of our employees out of work right now. As you're likely aware, the CDC has published new guidelines for schools that prevent students who are close contacts from having to quarantine if and only if both the infected student and the exposed student wore masks all the time. So universal masking keeps kids in school and parents at work. Also, sending students home who are close contacts creates a myriad of questions and testing requirements. Many of those questions are being fielded by our call center, and many of those tests are being conducted at the ECMC testing site and clinics. At the beginning of the pandemic, we were able to slow down some other areas of our operation to staff call centers and testing sites. Now we've incorporated those things back into our regular workflow, and the high volumes of calls and testing requests can easily overwhelm our teams with everything else coming in at the same time. Dr. Fogarty and Ann can share some numbers regarding testing, which have really exploded in the last 2 weeks. Nearly half the tests we're running now are for school-age children. So again, universal masking prevents close contacts, which prevents calls and requests for testing. Believe it or not, none of us actually enjoy full-time masking. The good news is that for your older students, there is a way out of universal masking. Right now, about 50% of Door County students who are eligible have received the COVID vaccination. I'm not sure what the specific numbers are for your district, We believe that number needs to be much higher in order to let the mask down. We want to work with you on ideas and programs that will continue to encourage your students and their parents to become vaccinated. We appreciate that you allow vaccinated students who are close contacts to remain in school and in their extracurricular activities during their monitoring period. That's an important incentive, and we need to create more incentives like that to encourage vaccination. Perhaps a mask mandate coupled with a target vaccination rate would incentivize young people and their parents to get the vaccine in order to avoid perpetual masking. Again, I want to thank you for the steps you've taken to bring students back for another great school year. At the same time, I want to implore you to reconsider universal masking because of the situation that we find ourselves in over the last few weeks. A few weeks ago, I thought that simply recommending masking would be a good first step. The situation in the community has worsened. The CDC exemption for close contacts in schools really only works with true universal masking. A high vaccination rate amongst middle and high schoolers could change that equation, but for now, masking should be required given the situation in our community and the 50% vaccination rate amongst youth. Thank you for giving me the time to speak with you this evening. I'll turn it over to Dr. Fogarty. After her statement, we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you.
Hi, I would like to thank all of you for allowing me to speak as well during the meeting. I know you are going to invest a lot of time this evening and a lot of thoughtful discussion. As you know, I serve as your district's medical advisor, and as such, I'm aware of and I understand the difficulties you're facing on a daily basis to keep your schools open. As Brian mentioned, these are challenging times, and trying to weigh the risks and benefits of various policies while remembering we are here to serve our community in its entirety is a very difficult job. We've requested to be on the agenda because of the pivotal role that schools play in pandemic mitigation and spread. Schools play a bigger role than public transportation. Twice as many students ride school buses in the United States than adults who take public transportation. These children are in every community in the country. This was made clear when the United States began government planning under George W. Bush. And this is why there was such a focus in shutting down schools in March of 2020. While the opening of schools took place this fall with higher infection rates than we had last year, many districts chose an optional masking policy in order to support a return to normal, to not be at each other's throats, and to see how it goes. The first couple of weeks have proven more difficult than even I imagined they would be. As of today, your district has 8 positive cases and 32 students who are at home in quarantine. For those students, there is no person option. And the learning that takes place puts them and their families in a very difficult position. For younger children, parents need to find care for their children during the day, often requiring them to miss work. And for older children, they're left with trying to figure out how to make up their work. 18 months ago, the duration of the current quarantine was seen as important enough to educators that it would ultimately lead to students and parents being required to adhere to insurance support. Now it happens repeatedly and is simply a part of life. Parents are told they need to find contingency plans and to expect short-term notice of the need for quarantine. As you know, this places an immense burden on parents and their children, one which disproportionately affects those in lower income brackets. Last year, when I stood before you in July, we decided together that in-person instruction was important enough to utilize a significant amount of both financial and personnel resources to do whatever it took to provide the opportunity for in-person instruction. We used many strategies and ultimately were very successful. And fortunately, we've learned a lot since last year. After good data collection, we have found that masks and keeping sick children out of school until their testing is negative are the 2 most valuable tools in decreasing the burden of contact tracing on both schools and families, as well as limiting secondary spread. We also learned in typical school contact, when children and staff are masked, the intra-school or secondary transmission rate is less than 1%. Which is allowed for the CDC modified quarantine for typical school contact. And this is a huge point, right? So if you take where you're sitting with universal versus optional masking, this is something that takes place in your district every day. So a 5th grader tests positive. In universal masking, the school looks at seating charts, sends out a template email to say 20 families, notifying the parents to be extra vigilant in monitoring for symptoms, and the positive case and their siblings are sent home. In optional masking, the school has to look at those same seating charts and those same 20 children, then have to have their vaccination records checked, as well as to see if they've had a history of COVID in the past 90 days. For those children who are vaccinated or have a history of COVID, they get the same template letter. Plus, the vaccinated children are then asked to mask, which must be monitored by school personnel. Remaining students are dismissed from school, which requires a phone call to parents, and then have to stay home for 10 days and be tested. Transmission with the Delta variant is on average to 5. So of the 7 students, of the 12 to 13 students that will ultimately be sent home based on your vaccination rate, 7 will return after missing 10 days, the remaining 5 will likely test positive, and then all of their siblings are sent home, and the cycle starts again. When COVID is in a family, it usually does not happen simultaneously, but rather these are nearly sequential quarantines, with some children and parents at home for 20 days or more. Contact tracing requires an exceptional amount of resources, nearly all of which is eliminated with universal masking. There's no phone calls, there's no vaccination checks, there's no upset parents. Quarantines are going to be inevitable as long as COVID remains a Category 1 disease. The real question is how many are affected by each positive case. We are better now at knowing what mitigation strategies are most likely to work. The ABC Science Collaborative is a nationwide organization and does have representatives from Wisconsin. It's collected and continues to collect data and provide it back to districts free of charge on best practices for managing schools during COVID. A summary of last year's data is here, and for whoever, we have copies for everybody. It serves as an excellent reference, and the back 3 pages provide all original studies. This year, they've asked that districts voluntarily participate in data collection. If they do so, they then have access to their own data and can compare it to blinded data, filtered by virtually any criteria: school size, region, mitigation strategies utilized, time frame, community data. I would highly suggest taking advantage of this opportunity and leverage it to make decisions. Last year, many attempted dashboards. I was never a fan of dashboards because no one knew what data to put on the dashboard. Now we know far more about which strategies to leverage and when. The best indicator for the need to pull more mitigation levers is the rate of secondary spread. This same strategy can be used when making decisions about relaxing, like going to optional masking in a highly vaccinated population. I also do not like wearing a mask, nor do I like standing here recommending that all students should wear masks. But for now, it's the only strategy effective enough to keep kids in person learning. I hope is that as the vaccine becomes available for all school-age children, the choice is truly back on the parents, and they can decide if they would like to have their child vaccinated or risk a quarantine. I thank you for your time, but I would like to just finish with one thought. In one of my many discussions with families after the decision for optional masking was released, this was a Sturgeon Bay parent, I will disclose. I asked the parent why she wasn't present at the August meeting to express her opinions, and her response is one that I won't forget. She stated that she knew how much you were all doing and dealing with, and didn't want to force the meeting to extend beyond what needed to. She stated that last year they used the CDC, the AAP, and my recommendations. I read what was out there, it seemed clear-cut, and I trusted they would do the right thing and follow the recommendations they did last year. I'm frustrated and confused, wondering why this year they don't seem to care about the safety of my children when I place them in their care each day. And while I know it's not a matter of caring from the school boards, I don't know that I've seen a more committed group of people with the time that you've invested in discussion. I do hope her message of trust and safety, which many families have placed in your hands, is helpful in considering the right decision for now. Please remember these decisions about COVID are by nature fluid. My hope is that we will be at a point that we can start to discuss relaxing requirements as the situation again changes. But we can't get there until the active case count and secondary spread is under control, and we each play a role in that.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Does the school board have any questions for the guest speakers?
My question is one in general, because I don't know who else to ask. First, I would echo everyone here and anyone I've ever met is highly frustrated because of this pandemic, which is no one's fault in this room. And so, first of all, I appreciate you guys coming. So the thing that I struggle with is, I guess my new challenge is, when do we start talking about life with COVID? I mean, because my experience in 18 months, and maybe everybody else's, it's always, we're almost there, push through. And I mean, are you guys talking about, because flu never went away, Lambda's coming around, we're Delta now, Lambda's coming, And I have not heard anyone credible saying this is going to stop. So, are you guys, so for instance, which I'm cultivating at this awesome group, which I'm lucky to be part of, is when are we going to talk about plussing up our staff? Because I got a buddy who runs as a surgeon down in Austin, Texas. He has the same problem. Because the problem is right now I'm losing my staff. And actually, we're going to talk about that now, because when we lose our great staff to COVID quarantine, that sucks, right? And that's what much of your message was at. I mean, is that discussion happening? Because I don't hear it anywhere else. Let's talk about life with COVID. They're going to have more staff, so when they have to quarantine their kids, because they will get sick, even with masks, you're going to get sick, right? That's a fact. So, are we talking about that? I mean, and other people, someone shares that if we get spiked, we're going to be, there's going to be a concern, right? Because fear is so powerful that we won't have enough medicine, right? And little Sturgeon Bay may not get the medicine because of a big city. So, are you guys planning properly to make sure we have enough of the therapeutics and all that smart stuff you guys do? Because you are treating them better, and we're learning. That's my understanding anyways, you know. Because I faced it a couple times. My son's faced it twice, I guess, according to the doctors. And we're, you know, so my fear level is lower than most of the people I run across, because some of them haven't faced it, and it's good for them. So anyway, I'll stop rambling, but is there a discussion? Because I don't want to fool my neighbors, my friends, and people I love that, hey, 3 more months, folks, and we're done. I ain't doing that. I don't lie to anybody. So are we talking about that? And do you have any comment on that? Because, right, there's no, hey, Tim, 2 weeks from now, we're good. Next fall, next football season. So any educational comments that can calm the frustration and realize, just like when we do risk analysis to drive to school every day, people die on the roads every day, we assess that risk. And we take it. Some people go skiing. Some people, there's risk, right? And what you're helping us understand is there's risk to this thing called COVID. And now Delta COVID. And when do we start allowing and trusting our people and informing them? And the school will help inform, and we want you here. And again, if I didn't say thanks for coming. When do we start having that discussion to inform people that, hey, you can start assessing your risk and moving forward? I mean, any discussion of that or anything?
Yeah, we have. I mean, we definitely started talking about that. And one thing you said nearly echoes what I've been saying for a long time now, and that is we have become so much more risk averse as a society over the last 18 months. It is frustrating. But I think that brings us back to the origins, or not the origins, but the first days of COVID. And if you remember, we always talk about flattening the curve and that sort of thing. And when we were talking about flattening the curve, we weren't talking about case counts. We were talking about, we wanted it to flatten to a level that wouldn't overwhelm the hospitals and overwhelm the medical facilities. And I thought we were there. I really did. I mean, our vaccination rate is so good in this community. I thought for sure, even when cases started to spike in the summer, Jim remembers me saying, remembers me saying this, that we don't necessarily have to do it the same way every other community is doing it in the country because we're more protected. And I felt like that was the case. Unfortunately, Delta is proving that even with a high vaccination rate like we have, apparently we need an even higher vaccination rate to get to the point where it doesn't impact hospitalizations in a way that could overwhelm the community. Because right now we're at that point, which is unfortunate. But it's not solely due to COVID. As I said, only 3 to 4 of our inpatients over the last couple of months have been, on a consistent basis at any given time, have been COVID positive patients. It's also been high volume at this point from deferred care that didn't occur the previous year. So that will work its way through, right? And we'll get back to some sort of steady state. But you're right, we are starting to look at, what does life look like with COVID? It's probably not going to go away. So how do we need to staff the hospital differently as a result of that? We are staffing up in some areas, absolutely. Unfortunately, I think nearly every hospital in the country is trying to do that, and so there just aren't the number of nurses and respiratory therapists and that sort of thing to go around. But absolutely, hear what you're saying. We do need to be thinking about policies that help us learn to live with this in a reasonable way. And in a way, I think that's what the CDC's done with this exception that they've made, where they've said, if everybody's masked up, then you don't have to send kids home. Because it's a realization that we can't keep sending kids home for 10, 14 days at a time. It's not good for them. It's not good for the school district. And so the CDC has given us an out. this year. But we have to take it, and the only way we can take it is to make sure that kids are matched up, otherwise we can't take advantage of that. I think the numbers that you gave, Amy, were 8 positive, is that right? And how many on quarantine? 32? So if everybody was masking, the 8 positives would be out and their siblings, but everybody else would still be in school.
So with the masking, right now we have that 3-foot rule with masks. Is that the out you're talking about?
Yep, 3-foot rule.
Well, we got
We would still have some.
We still have
because
kids
they still
within
get
3
kids
foot
within
rule.
3 feet. We'd still have kids work on group projects and sit too close to each other for 15 minutes. It wouldn't be down to 8+ siblings. It'd be 8+ siblings plus a few. Especially in
It's
the
important because
lower grades.
in fair communication, when people are saying if we just masked, you would never send kids home, that is not an accurate fact, because the kids that we went right home are masking. I've gotten phone calls from the caring parents. Their kids are masked and they went home because they were within 3 feet. So to help us send the right message, so, you know, right, this is the challenge of all this wonderful information that.
Mr. Helps, I'm going to cut you off.
Yeah, good, yes.
Mr. Helps, we had our first 20 students we sent out on quarantine. He's estimated 4 would have been saved from going home if we had put it 3 feet. Right. So we still would have said 16 home.
Still would have said
16, right, of the first 20. I don't know about the last 12.
How many of the 20 that we sent out on quarantine ended up turning positive?
None yet, but it's a little too early to tell because they need to have the days of incubation.
But that's not point exactly. I mean, and I think that's what the CDC has acknowledged too, is that we're sending these kids home, and a large number of them don't turn positive, and so let's keep them in school, and so they're giving you a way to do that.
So, but if they're, let me start from the beginning. First, I want to thank you all. I'm so glad I retired. Especially thank you, Jim, and you working with your community, the community on a regular basis. I think it's awesome. I think it's very well received. I think that the hospitals developed itself as a central point. Okay. And you too, Amy, with all your time, and you were here about 14 months ago. But thanks to you, Amy, I started looking at this a little bit differently. Because, you know, I've been in healthcare the whole time, and your presentation 14 months ago, brought to my mind that there was more to it than just healthcare. Because you brought into the whole discussion other, I always call them pillars of life: social, spiritual, psychological, and health. And all of our COVID, the thing that bothers me, and I really split over this, and my home is split, let me tell you, with my spouse. But my concern is we're always addressing this one-dimensionally. Because I remember you telling us the problem with masks in grade school children. That they don't, if I remember right, you told us they don't fit properly. They get wet. Yeah, you indicated there some issues that you had at that time, and the separation. And we do know that it occurs. The kids don't wear them properly. They come home. Most of the masks are made at home with cotton or something like that. They wear them all day long. They get dirty. They get wet. And I think at the last time the public health person was here, I described them as a walking petri dish. So those are my concerns. And also, at the last meeting, after our last meeting, when we voted to do what we did, I was at, you can all probably guess right, where I get a lot of the information in. But a mother walked up to me and said, "Thank you so much, because wearing a mask, my 6-year-old refuses to talk." Which goes along with some of the stuff I remember you told us about some psychological issues of the whole isolation, including masking and all that type of stuff. So from that day forward, now I'm really confused what to do. I think, as I said, there's another branch of COVID coming down the road that we haven't seen yet. That's going to probably be worse. And unfortunately, one of these is going to come, and our shots aren't going to work anymore. It's going to have to be, so we're going to have to do some more genetic re-engineering. But with respect to, and I'll just let my frustrations out. From the time COVID started, it's been an unending chain of events, of promises. I remember Fawzi in the beginning said, masks don't make any difference in this, okay? Those were his exact words. Then he went to an extreme of, you gotta wear 3 masks. And then we were told, if you get shots, you don't have to wear a mask. And now we're being told if you get shots, you might have to wear a mask. And then there was this discussion earlier in the summer that kids don't have to wear masks in schools until the teachers union got a hold of it and sent some horrible memos, and then all of a sudden the government changed its position to now kids have to wear masks. CDC is all over the place. So they haven't expected a body like this to adequately respond. It's very confusing. And I understand the position you're in because you deal with it. You deal with health. But in the education world, there's a whole other bunch of wheels going on that need to be addressed. And I really don't know what to do. We were promised herd immunity would happen when about 35% of the population would get injected. Oh, when 35% of the population would have COVID. That's what Fauci originally said. About 30%. Then went up to 40%. Then he raised it to 50%. And I do agree. I think you would have to agree that you have to take. And Jim, help me on this. If you take the number, you have to really look at the population, the number that have been vaccinated, plus the number of people that have had a disease, to see the protection. Because everything I read is you are as protected, if not maybe more protected, if you've had the disease and your antibody testing is positive. Is that correct? So in Door County, we must be approaching 80%, because about 70% of the population. So when does herd immunity occur? I don't know if it ever will occur.
Or, as your colleague said, whatever.
I don't know. So well, that was always the goal out there. We're all going to get, and then we're going to have herd immunity and everything's going to be fine. So back to the issue ahead of masks. I sat down and I've done my own research. And the only thing I can come up with was Jim, you read the Wall Street Journal? I can't remember if you read the Wall Street Journal on a regular basis. You did, okay. So about 3 weeks ago, there was an editorial in the Wall Street Journal on masks for kids. And this conclusion was, there is no studies. There is no data out there. There was one study, which, but it was a loose study, so they really didn't give much credit. It said that after 2 weeks or something like that, the decline, they predicted a 2% decline, a 1% decline in the amount of COVID. At 30 days, if all the kids wore masks, there would be 2% fewer cases than if they all wore masks. But what I find troubling is that there is no scientific data from a real randomized, double-blind type study with regards to masks. The Wall Street Journal couldn't find it 2 weeks ago, and so I presume it must not exist. So a lot of this is listening to Professor so-and-so here and Dr. so-and-so there, and you'll listen to one doctor on TV that says mask or not, or another doctor says mask. So now it's for us to come to a conclusion, what should we do?
If I can just address that.
Please.
So my name is Jim Heiss. I'm the Chief Medical Officer at Door County Medical Center. And I also am a hospitalist. For those who don't know what that means, it's just I'm the hospital doctor. I'm the medicine doctor who takes care of patients in the hospital. So I've taken care of a fair percentage of the COVID patients we have in the hospital. So a couple of things. And the first comment I want to make, my center will laugh. I'm not trying to be snarky, but it's where how my head works and how crazy I am.
I know.
Is there's no randomized control trials that prove that a parachute saves your life if you jump out of an airplane. So there's not always, you don't always have that. I think what we didn't hear Amy or Brian say, and I said the same thing last night at the Surgeon Bay School Board, is none of us are sitting here saying, oh my God, those kids are going to get sick, they're going to die, oh my God. So we're not talking about the kids are going to die, this is death rate. That's not what we're talking about at all. The big thing is, how do we, as the district's medical advisor, essentially the question posed was, how do we keep our kids in school and go about doing our normal business? So the answer to that is, in order to avoid sending kids home, in order to avoid all this quarantine stuff, that's the best thing we have right now. Bottom line is, you don't have to do it, but then the situation will continue as it is. And I love, sir, your question about when is this going to go away? Because believe me, you know, when June came, I was never so thrilled. And then when Delta started to come, the numbers started to go up again, many of these folks have heard me say, I can't do this anymore. I mean, enough is enough. I think what we will see is it's going to become endemic. And what endemic means is like a common cold. I mean, the other 4 coronaviruses that exist are all common colds. So eventually it'll get there. And so what we need to do to get through this and to get to the point where it's endemic is to stop the case, stop that virus from continuing to hop from person to person to person. And the way to do that is immunity. So the gentleman earlier that was talking and said, you know, we don't count someone that's been ill. I would agree with that statement. I mean, I think that's, if you have this illness, you are in way better shape than someone who has not. So I think that is how we're going to get through this. Now, vaccines, whether you like that idea or not, the fact of the matter is they work and they're safe. And so whether you've gotten the infection or you get vaccinated, that's how we're going to get through this, and it will get. So I don't think it's going to continue where you're going to, like you mentioned, the lab and the rest of the Greek alphabet. There will reach a point where it's just not going to continue. There can't be, at some point, you'd actually have a lethal virus, which would basically burn through a population, kill everybody, and the virus would die, right? That's how it would work. So eventually, it's going to stop. And I wish more than anything in the world I could tell you that by January, we're not going to talk about this anymore. It's hard to say. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's kind of how I think about this.
Everyone wants to become something.
No, I guess I would just like to, so we're here to try to have you have as many kids in school as we can, and there are other options, right? So another option is to keep the kids 6 feet apart. And logistically, that's not going to work, right? So there's things that you have to do within that. My suggestion would be, if you're really quarantining, you know, of the 20 kids, you were going to quarantine 16 anyway, then I would, in addition to suggesting masking, is trying to have the teachers re-looking at where desks are in rooms and how we're
They've already
positioning
done that. Teachers have done that. There's
It's a big process.
Right, and I'm saying, and so sometimes that's not, but,
scheduled and keep the kids farther apart, but that wasn't good for education, I don't think.
right. But then even within the, I mean, and I don't know the specific in terms of looking at the scene charts, but there are what we call them, and again, the state school medical advisors are talking about which levers do you pull and when do you pull them, right? So when do you really start to, when you have to go back to an AD schedule because you can't sustain it. I'm not saying that you need to do that, but there's when we come before you, we weigh those, right? So we understand an AD schedule is not a sustainable schedule. We understand 6 feet in between kids is not sustainable. So with the options that you have, and as frustrating as this is, I understand that. Everyone can debate, you guys can debate for the next month straight that you don't feel like you need to send the kids home if they're named a close contact. You'll get nowhere because until the CDC changes the category of the disease, that's the law, okay? That you're going to have to send kids home if they're close contacts for the 10 days.
That's my understanding, the law says we gotta send them home, correct?
Yeah, because it's a category 1 disease. We would have the exact same conversation if you had a case of measles in your school. We would be doing the exact same thing. Nobody just has any experience with it because you haven't had measles in your school.
And that's my frustration with the public health. If they have the ability to require masking in school, why haven't they told us to do so?
They don't have the ability to require masking in school.
Well, what about Dane County?
She is being sued.
Okay, but they have the ability right now.
They're just
Right
hoping
now
that
they're
the
doing
judge
it.
hasn't put an injunction yet, and she's hoping her 28 days expires before they get support.
I mean, that's been a common theme is why do I have to be the one to make this decision? If you're not, and I would be saying the same thing where I'm sitting in your position.
Well, I have made the decisions and recommendations to the board and been rolling with it.
No,
And
we haven't.
whatever decision I make, I know someone's not happy, and that's okay.
Well, that's called leadership, right? I mean, it's hard.
Well, I know it's worse now than ever.
Yeah, no,
Oh, yeah.
Don't tell me, I understand the leadership part. I
None
got
of
it.
this is any fun at all. There's no two ways around it. It's just, you know, the bottom line when it comes to, we're just talking about the pandemic, we're talking about all these different things. You know, if a person says, look, I'm just tired of this, I don't want to do anything, that's how it's going to continue. Because all this virus wants to do is jump from person to person. That's all it wants to do, and that's all it will do until you stop it somehow.
That's my question, is if we mask, are we stopping it sooner than if we don't mask? If we don't mask, it spreads faster, right? So does it go through the crowd and we're done?
That's
Or,
a good question.
right? I mean, I almost feel like I should have my kids get together with other kids this summer
When I was a kid, my parents had chicken pox parties.
Yeah, you know what, here's the deal, so you're right, I mean, that you can, that's one way to do it, is you can let it burn through a population. So that's one thing you absolutely could do. So what we've seen is that the death rate, the mortality rate is about 1%. What's 1% of 350 million people? That's 3.5 million people. So you just have to ask yourself, are you okay with that? How's that going to affect the economy? So there's pragmatism behind it. That's how I look at it. I'm just very practical. It's like it's 3.5 million people, you know, and that's also just death. And we've also gotten to this place that I've noticed is that death is sort of the standard by which we measure things. So if I say to you, my sister got into a bad car accident, the car rolled over, she had traumatic brain injury, she had her spinal cord severed, so she can't really talk, she can't walk, she's drooling, she's being fed by a feeding tube. But you know what? She didn't die. So it's a pretty mild car accident. That's kind of that's what I'm hearing. And that's what happens with COVID. And I can tell you this firsthand because I've seen it. People they're at home, they're out 4 months, and it really stinks. I mean, and that's if you survive it. And most people do, frankly. So the concept of letting it burn through and letting your immune system do it is one thing you can do, but there are consequences to that decision.
Okay, Jim, and I agree, that's true in a model, but we've introduced into the society now the vaccine.
Yeah.
So, it's making changes. If you've had the vaccine and get COVID, you're not going to probably die from it, right?
Which, by the way, we think is totally a reasonable endgame for masking. I mean, once all kids are able to get the vaccine, that's probably a good.
Well, that's going to raise a whole bunch of issues because if I was a parent,
What
I don't know
percentage
if
of
I
we gotta get to? What percentage do we have to get to vaccine?
Well, but at least then, the parents have a choice. The parents have a choice, they make their decision.
So you're saying 12 and older, parents have their choice to have their kids vaccinated or not, so that'd be a good place to divide the vaccine or not? No?
I think, I mean, to me, that's a reasonable approach, because I agree with you. I mean, my kids are both older than 12, we had these conversations at home, and they made their decision to be vaccinated, and so, yeah, I mean, I think that's a reasonable approach.
I have a question.
Go ahead,
I'm
Keith.
sorry, no, I want to echo what everyone else has said. Thank you all for coming and all the great work you've got. I would applaud the job the hospital's done. I had COVID and the hospital, Dr. Hayes called me before public health and I got a letter from him 3 days after he called me. So thank you, kudos. I heard the comment that we have to get it under control. What is under control? Like, you know, somebody else mentioned herd immunity, we had to be at this percent to reach that herd immunity where life is normal again. 70%, argue that number, whatever, with the people I had it vaccinated. What I struggle with is, you know, COVID is part of life now, and when is it under control? I've never heard a number, like, what is the new herd immunity number? Is it 80? Is it 90? Can you provide that, or give any insight where it's under control?
I can't give you a number, but I can, for those it's sort of a joke. Those who say you don't never use the over again. There is an equation, and it's frustrating because you're right.
I'm a numbers guy.
Right. I know you are. The herd immunity number keeps going up. There's a reason for it. The reason for it is we look at a number that's the infectivity. So it's called the R naught, R sub zero, right? So what Dr. Fogarty made a comment. Early on in this pandemic, one person would infect 2 people. That's the R naught. How infected is it? Now we've learned that the R naught of Delta variant is anywhere from 5 to 10. So it's like chickenpox, I'm sorry, like measles in that sense. It's very spreadable. So you take that R naught minus 1 over R naught times a quantity that I can't remember. It's just a percentage, and I'm blanking on what that is. And that's the reason why, as the R naught goes up, as we let variants continue to, as the virus makes mistakes, makes genetic mistakes, that give it the ability to get past things, that's why it's going up. And that's something that's been around as far as epidemiology and things like that. That's been a fact for decades. It's nothing to do with COVID. But it is frustrating, and that's where I will admit, for everyone in the room, I don't think the messaging has been good this entire pandemic. I think it's been really difficult, and so that's why I sit here and kind of just do my best to try and be as straightforward as I can be, because none of us like this. It really stinks, but what I want to do is I want to get past this, and the getting past it and ignoring it are not compatible. And so that's the difficulty. We have to figure out what can we do that's sustainable that we can get past it.
Do you have any insight, like we saw, I know there were people waiting when the vaccine first came out, I mean, they were lining up, couldn't get enough of it. I mean, I went to the UWG place and there was 100 people there. And then that lasted, and now we're kind of there. The people that wanted to get it are, I think, have an ample opportunity, with their kids, with their families. There is going to be a population that is going to refuse it. The flu has been around. I get flu shot every year because I think it's important, whatever. But not everybody gets a flu shot. I mean, some people think that the vaccines that have been around cause autism, so they choose not to vaccinate their kids, and now we have some of those things back. But what is life going to be with that population? I mean, we're finding, you even said that people that are hospitalized, people that are who are sick are getting vaccinated. How can you get people to comply, not comply, but stress the importance, or is it just, as far as we get, there's just no.
I don't want to cut any board members off. I don't want to cut these people off because their information they're giving us is important. And if we're going to talk about vaccination, maybe because they're guest speakers, maybe we can call on them when we talk about vaccination. I think the question before us right now is, because we could talk all night about life with COVID and where is it going and what's going to happen. The question before us right now is, what do we do right now with what we know to keep them in school? They can come back next month and tell us something else. Right now, our question is, how do we keep them in school? So do you have additional questions for them regarding that topic?
Yes. So come on that question, or that statement. So let's say we go back to the mask requirement. Okay, so that covers 8 hours a day. There's another 16 hours a day they're not going to be here, and weekends. So it's probably there's going to be probably some of our students who may be masked all week, or not. We had a Packer game this weekend, right, with 80,000 people packed in, eating hot dogs, but not drinking beer. But so it really isn't foolproof, because someone told me that, and tell me if this number is correct. The Green Bay school system has had masks in place for the beginning of the school year, and they have over 1,000 kids out with COVID.
They have 1,000 out with COVID. They have over 1,500 out between isolation, which would be COVID, and quarantine. Correct.
So that's part of it. This is only a part-time thing because the kids go into their regular life. But if you really look at the crux of interfering with education, is this whole quarantine issue. Because that is the thing that's pulling kids out, impacting families, because mom or dad or aunt or find somebody now to watch the kids who are probably going to be playing outside the whole time, because the odds are they're not going to get COVID. I mean, the numbers show that I think the bulk of them do not get COVID, that are quarantined. They do not come back with positive quarantine, okay? So I think, it's probably not your power, But something needs to be looked at the quarantine process. So another process would be, is there the ability to do, with how fast does COVID show up in the test? I mean, like instant or within 24 hours, the schools have testing capability. So that maybe Johnny or Mary goes home for 2 days, but they're not there for 10 days. I mean, I can't believe, I may be wrong, but COVID sits in the body and nothing happens, and then all of a sudden on the 12th, 10th day, it shows up. Okay, but then you gotta say, what?
That's how they came up with the
That's how they came up with the 10 days.
I understand.
Okay, can I ask a question here? Sure, okay. If on day 1, am I more likely to pop up, or day 2 compared to day 10?
Depends on when you have symptoms or if you have symptoms.
Okay. Go ahead, Sherry.
Well, that was my next question.
Not all diseases have a 10-day quarantine. Measles is actually much longer.
Right, what I'm asking is,
Depends on the viral-
you're rolling the dice on a percentage, right? Because the kids that are quarantined and have been vaccinated at the high school level, we let them come back with wearing masks because we know they're less likely to catch it, correct? Even though they may have been in close proximity. So my question was, if day 9 or 10, is that less likely than day 2 or 3? Is there a point that we say, okay, now it's worth their education to get them back in school?
Yeah, that was
The
my...
lowest quarantine that's out there that's acceptable is negative testing on day 6 or 7 with return on day 8.
Okay, and that's the current paradigm. But I'm following up with this question. I presume this has all been plotted out, and the odds begin to change as you go from day 1 to day 10. If you study it 100,000 cases, the spike in the test probably would occur at what day?
There are, okay. I don't,
Because it
we
seems like we're trying to
debate the validity of the quarantine until the cows come home again, okay? The deal is, those are the acceptable quarantine
I
periods.
understand, but we
There
always
are
seem to be
tests.
working, but we seem to be working always in the 100% confidence level. And
No, we're not. We're not at all. We started with 14 days, and then we moved it down to 10. And then
And one time we
moved
were
it-
at 5, I thought, but there was 5 or something. And that got thrown out real fast.
Not.
Okay.
Not that that works.
But the other side of the equation is the education process. And sitting out these kids home all the time. I mean, the numbers aren't in yet, but some states are starting to see their scores for the last year. And they are taking a noticeable dump.
That's why we're here.
No, I understand.
We're here to help you keep kids in school because it is important and because we believe that, and I have been saying that in every public forum that I have been given the opportunity to say it since I was asked the question about should we do in-person education. I 1000% could not agree more with the statement that the kids need to stay in the building. So we're here to help you figure that out within the constraints that exist. We cannot debate the category 1 disease. We cannot debate the quarantine length. We cannot debate what is the definition of a close contact. Those are beyond our realm to debate. So what are we able to debate? And within what you can control, how can we help you to give the best advice that we know right now, understanding that science by nature is fluid, okay? And we would all be at Earth is flat and, science is changing constantly, that's the whole point. How can we right now, with the knowledge we have, within the constraints of the system that we operate, help you to keep kids in school?
I'm sorry, I can't call on guests on public. The time to speak was, for policy was in the beginning of the meeting.
Just have a question.
I'm sorry, I can't.
I think we pretty
Okay,
well
so-
covered this and need to move on.
So if the board's going to have questions about masking, we will call on these people again during this COVID discussion. If you're going to have questions about vaccination, we will call on these people. And that's not to cut you off. It's to keep the meeting moving along because we can do scenarios all night long. So please stay. Does anyone wish to have any items removed from the consent agenda? Hearing none, the consent agenda will be approved by consent, and that includes the donations from the Fifth Quarter Foundation of $1,000 to the fifth grade Trees for Tomorrow trip, and $250 toward the refreshments for the new school dedication celebration.
If we're gonna have our guest speakers stay to ask questions, can we move those agenda items up to respect?
I have reports.
Yeah, move those.
Okay, we're gonna move past, we're gonna move old business up
Yep.
ahead of reports. And we'll have a short discussion on, we're not gonna discuss board goals here. What I want to do toward the end of the meeting is maybe schedule a special meeting to talk about board goals. Okay, so discussion at school operations and COVID. Mr. Lutke.
Sure. Currently, we have 8 positive cases, 6 in the elementary school, 2 in the middle school. The 2 middle school students have siblings in the elementary school who are also positive. That has led us to 32 other students out on quarantine. These are due to close proximity or siblings of a positive case. Currently, with optional masking, our elementary students, 4K through 5th grade, on Wednesday, 25% were wearing masks. The middle school is at 12% wearing masks, and the optional masking in the high school is at 8%. The concern I have is, again, with staffing. We have 48 of our staff members have a child attending Sevastopol. There's only 6 that don't attend, so that's a really good percentage. They like our school and send their kids here. 32 of those staff members have a child attending the elementary age group. If vaccinated, staff member may continue to work here if they have contact with a positive case, provided they mask. If unvaccinated, they're out for 14 days past the last contact date of their positive case. Staff members who have children are here we're going to lose them even if they're vaccinated because they got to take care of their kids and have daycare. There's not daycare in our county. They scramble last minute, we're going to lose them. So my recommendation is we have required masking for all 4K through 6th grade students when indoors. The exception would be in physical education class in the gym. The gym allows more space for them to run around. And then optional masking for grades 7 through 12. Mandatory masking for all staff. For educational purposes, if a teacher is 6 feet or farther away from all students, they remove their mask to provide instruction. And of course, if someone's alone in the room, they do need their mask. And then we follow all protocols outlined in the September 1st letter I sent to the parents, and allow the use of rapid testing for COVID. And we'll keep changing as we have to, as this changes as well.
That's the superintendent's recommendation. Board members, questions, discussion? Cindy?
If our goal is to reduce transmission of the virus, regardless of age and grade, why are we not doing, why is it the recommendation that we just do universal masking throughout Sevastopol school?
The 7th through 12th grades have the opportunity to be vaccinated. Their parents have chosen for them to be living in that world. We don't have the problem at the high school and middle school level at this point. It's stemming from the elementary.
I guess I'm going to say what I said last time. If masking is, we were successful in last year with our masking throughout the school, why would we not embrace that same solution?
I don't know if we were successful last year. We had 98 cases of COVID here at school with being masked fully, and we ran an AD schedule up till March 1st. We were only here 2 weeks with full students here. So it was a combination of having half the kids here and masking. It wasn't the same. So, and I don't know if it was successful. We did our best, but it wasn't as good as the previous school year, I don't think. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but that's my opinion.
I guess I have difficulty because I hear these people saying universal masking, am I correct? So I have difficulty not heeding the medical advice that I can be given tonight. I'm not a medical person, so I have to.
I have a question. What are Gibraltar, do you know what Gibraltar's numbers are right now? They have mandatory masking for everyone, I think, when inside.
Zero positives, how many can you count?
As of yesterday, I don't know. As of yesterday, close of day, they had 29 that were out because of being sick or test pending on siblings. Because if a child is sick and has a test pending, they're sending the siblings home as well.
That's three different than.
I will say
They're all
this,
same
so
place.
if people are asking about what a high enough vaccination rate is or what to do. We have the school districts here. I will say that I also serve as a medical advisor at Notre Dame Academy. They have optional masking. All of their students are able to be vaccinated at over 70% vaccination rate. They are not successful currently. They have a huge number of their students that are out or that are wearing masks in the school because of being close contact.
So when you say huge number, you've got a ballpark on that? And what's their population?
It depends on what grade you're talking about. Their freshman class, and their freshman class is the one that's having the most trouble, to be fairly honest. More than half of their kids are wearing masks right now because of being close contact, which they're allowed to do. So they're still in school, right? So they would have half their freshman class out, but it's because of their vaccination rate. So when we're talking about herd immunity, what do you need for a vaccination rate, or when are we going to say that the vaccination rate is high enough? I don't know that we know that. I think that what we have to be doing is following how many people you have as close contacts, because you're going to have positives. It's just going to happen because of what happens outside your school building. When you look at pandemic mitigation, though, what happens within your school walls, because of the type of contact that occurs, it turns out is far more important than what happens outside the school walls. And I would also say that the school, so if you look at how, again, I'm not sure if that was a centered descent, but when you look at how kids interact within the school, the number of people that they are in contact with, and the type of contact that they have by nature of being children, even teenagers, is very, very different than even adult type contact. And when you truly look at pandemic mitigation and spread, okay, so there's lots of computer models. There's a very good book that for people that have been in meetings with me lately, I've been recommending that discusses pandemic mitigation and modeling, which is called The Premonition by Michael Lewis. It goes through the whole history and why schools are so important. And so the deal is when you have cases, how high does the number have to be for vaccination to not have secondary spread? Because what you don't want to have, I don't think that the school wants to put themselves in a position where you're sending kids home because of something that's happened within your walls, right? So you can control that part. If a kid gets COVID because they're playing fourth grade basketball, or because they go to a Packer game, or because their high schooler is out running around town, that is not your problem. If that kid gets sent home, that is not the school's problem, okay? That's a parent problem, it's a family problem, it's a kid problem. They have to deal with, and that's their responsibility. But where I think schools do have to think about their role is if a child comes into your building, and even if that student is wearing a mask, if another student is not wearing a mask, and then you put that student at risk just by virtue of being in your building because of the conditions that you set up, that's difficult. You spend a lot of time talking about school safety, right? Like, I would wager that there's a lot of bulletproof glass doors, automatic doors. So, right, so school safety is a big deal, and you take it seriously in other areas, and I don't see this as being much.
Which takes me back to our original question. We can't control what they do outside.
Right.
What do we do at this table? What do we do to keep them in school? Do we agree with the superintendent's recommendation, or do we not agree with that and want to go another direction?
I have one comment, and I'll follow up with something there. Is one of the things that I struggle with, just because of who I am and my background, just like we all are, is I think what you said. I'm following you. So a sixth grade and under, just kind of getting to supporting his recommendation for what that's worth at that point. But if I'm right, if I'm understanding what you're saying, if there's someone above 12 that is vaccinated and their family chooses that they wear a mask, they should not need to be quarantined in most cases. Is that correct? In most cases?
Yeah.
So I served our military for 22 years, and everyone knows that, right? So, but my point is freedom of choice. And what I struggle with, and I don't disagree, I mean, I actually agree with everything you're saying. And you guys, by the way, should be on the news and get all those other ones off, especially you on the right, sir. But anyways, so I can't fix that, right? So you've explained it the best to me. And I have searched far and wide for 18 months. And like I said, actually, I'm lucky to have a lot of doctors that have friends. So where I'm at with this discussion is, in high school, I support the freedom of, and I want to educate people, by the way, so what you're helping us is tremendous, right? And I also think you and we are going to have staffing issues. That's why I brought that up, and we need to hire more people. And I know you can't find anyone to get hired. And I know if you're a nurse and you want to travel, you can make a lot of money right now, right? So just telling you where I'm at, and I'm wasting your time because for this, that's the thing that's underlying me. Is I allow people, I trust my neighbor, I do. And I think they make decisions best for their family. Because like me, I actually counsel with my doctor on a regular basis, and I advise my family members to do that, right? So that's just kind of the struggle, right? And you've said a lot about the R0 and all that kind of stuff, and the bigger challenge of a type C or whatever you said it is. So I get it, I've learned a lot. I guess if there's no other comment, here's what my comment is. I move to approve the recommended school operations plan as presented by the superintendent.
Just remind the committee, you know, everything previously that we approved here, we gave it to the superintendent.
Well, we change all the time, and we'll do that again. And you know, as we learn, you know, different things, we have a motion on the table.
Are there any, so the motion is, Mr. Volk?
May I read it?
Read the motion back.
Could I just suggest perhaps a plain debate, Kyle kind of put in a last sentence on that I didn't hear any of the board debate, which is the rapid test suggestion.
Well, I mean,
my opinion is there's a rapid test out there, why aren't we using it?
Well,
my question to you is, Brian or Jim, since you have your nurses here, are they able to do rapid screening?
We're gonna vote on this issue, and we can continue that under this topic item. So we're gonna vote.
Here's what we have.
You wanna know about rapid testing? About testing?
It's in this motion.
It's in the motion.
it's the last sentence.
Okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Was there a second to that motion?
Yes.
So anyway, my question is, are the nurses empowered to do rapid testing? And on site here?
Sherry, we have summit testing here twice a week. They can do rapid.
Oh, no, this is on the table. I have a question, if I may. I think it's on the discussion, and you might be right. What is your opinion on the rapid test? And anyone who watches these videos know I have experience with rapid tests and different tests. 5 in a day, all different tests, and the state level epidemiologists struggle with mine. So please, ma'am, what is your read on the rapid test?
I think that I just want everybody to be aware of what the different what testing options you're going to require for your students, because I get a lot of messages from school nurses every day regarding what tests you're going to accept or not. Currently, your school district accepts PCR testing as the test of, we'll say test of choice. So this would be a change to that current operation. If you would like more discussion on that, I'm happy to provide that. I just want everyone to know how that's
Why
going
do
to
we use
roll.
that test? Is that the test the medical professions or county recommend?
Yes. Of the option, I mean, no test is perfect. No test is perfect. It's the one that's going to provide you the best sensitivity and specificity when you're making decisions about sending kids home from school or allowing them back into your school based on that result.
Is that the one that goes on your money? Is that the one you stick the thing?
What is, do you know what is the, my ignorance, what is the Bellin used for their testing? Is that a PCR test?
Bellin at their hospital
In Green Bay.
uses PCR testing.
Because
That's why.
the medical team, they counsel me after 5 tests and 2 and 3 different scores, they said the Bellin PCR was the gold standard. So I appreciate your comment. I get false tests, they suck sometimes.
I would offer an amendment to that motion, based on what we have heard from the medical people, that we go to universal masking.
I don't think you can.
I don't think we can do it.
Because I won't accept that, but we can vote it out now and then start again.
We have to vote.
You can't do a motion, you can't do an amendment.
We can't do an amendment. We have to
That's not an
deal
amendment,
with
that's a
this.
change of
We have to
everything.
deal with this motion first. So does anyone have further discussion on this?
I think Carl should be the motion.
Right now, I have a motion by Mr. Kakamansky with a second by Mr. Weidman to adopt amended COVID procedures as presented.
You want me to read it?
I think you should spell the medical procedures out in the motion so that, I'm sorry, Carl, but.
No, it's all
because
right,
that's the way
I'm
you
going to
said
have
it.
to get them from Mr. Ruby.
You should spell them out in the motion so that
Extra copy for
for
it.
posterity, when somebody reads it, they know what they were.
Anyone there is super better application.
Okay, so, to adopt amended COVID procedures, require masking for all 4K through 6th grade students when indoors. The exception will be physical education class and the gym. Optional masking for grades 7 through 12, mandatory masking for all staff for educational purposes. If a teacher is 6 feet or farther away from all students, they may remove the mask to provide instruction. If one is alone in the room, then one does not need to mask. Follow all protocols outlined in the September 1, 2021 letter to parents. Allow the use of rapid testing for COVID. That is the motion on the table.
Is there a
right now.
start date for this?
What's that?
Is there an effective date of this?
I would start on Monday because it's going to take me a day to get the information out.
Effective September 21st.
That's Monday, sure.
I mean, that should be it.
Are there any other questions or discussion?
I have a question.
Yes.
How do we intend to separate the various grades, 6th grade and older?
6th grade is where your 12-year-olds are.
I'm just
What do you
saying,
mean separated? And
well, if we're to protect the children, and we have some that are masked and some that are not, how are we going to differentiate between those that are required to be masked?
that's why the whole 6th grade is going to mask, whether they're 12 or 11, it doesn't matter. They're going to wear masks to 6th grade and younger will mask. So they don't,
I believe, is it right that the likelihood of high schoolers in the 4K room is pretty small?
That's my question about the interface.
so the time would be when 6th is with 7th and 8th in the cafeteria and out in recess.
There is no policing that.
No. We can't stop everything
We can't stop everything.
unless,
I understand.
My last comment is I'm not a medical expert, and I've read a lot of stuff, and I guess I agree with Sue. I'm uncomfortable varying from the medical profession's recommendation. So with that, we'll take a vote, a roll call vote. Keith?
Aye.
No,
Aye.
Aye.
No.
Aye.
The motion is approved and will take effect on Monday. Then we will also move up, while the medical staff is here, the discussion only on COVID vaccination for staff. Mr. Wyden, you asked specifically to have this on the agenda, so would you like to lead the discussion?
Sure. You know, I guess maybe I'm kind of a blockhead on this whole issue, but, you know, I think Mr. Heisey put it very, very bluntly when he said, in the pulse, that with COVID, now COVID, you're either going to get vaccinated or you're going to get sick. And I just, you know, being one of those people that don't want to get sick, I don't want to see our children get sick. I want our staff come down with it. I look at vaccination as the most important aspect of trying to fight this disease. And that's period. Now, that being said, maybe we need to get a handle on just where our staff and our children who are eligible for vaccination, just where we stand and what percentage of that population is vaccinated. So once we establish that, if we establish that it's 75 to 80%, and I know it's debatable as to where the herd immunity standard, or whatever you want to call it, is established. If we're in a high enough percentage, maybe we don't have to mandate vaccination as such. But if we're in the 50% or whatever, where it looks like, most of the country is at right now, although York County has certainly a good percentage, I think we have to start considering mandatory vaccinations. Now, on the federal level, I think the federal employees are going to be faced with this situation. I'm sure there's going to be court battles, and it's going to go on and on while people are sick and go to the hospital. And the one thing that comes out every time when hospital administrators are asked, or people with CDC are asked, those people, this whole situation is totally avoidable. And why? Because we have the vaccines available. And if we don't use them, why don't we have measles? Why don't we have children who have measles that come to school? We have been diligent in vaccinating people, these children, for many years, and measles has become a fairly minor. I don't think we've eradicated it, but it's become a non-issue. So in my opinion, vaccination, we sit here and we just constantly debate this whole masking issue. And I see the point in it. I see the point in children who are not able to be vaccinated to be protected by masks. But I also see the opportunity for those people who have, are approved for vaccination to get vaccinated and lessen the degree of infection that occurs within the school population. And I think it's also important, I guess I would say, reiterate what Dr. Fogarty said, is that this school only has these children for 6 to 7 hours a day. What happens to these children outside of the school is really outside of our control. And if they go into a home that's unvaccinated, or they are associated with children who are unvaccinated, the risk of them becoming infected with COVID is quite high. And as long as they're susceptible hosts, COVID doesn't care. It will infect those people if they're not vaccinated. And I, for one, do not want to see, again, people infected with COVID when we have the choice to be vaccinated.
I'm going to turn this to Mr. Litkey. One, does the school district have the right to poll students? And two questions. Do we have the right to poll students and staff to see if they're vaccinated? And two, what is the legal counsel's opinion on the president's mandate that every place with employees over 100 require vaccination?
I would like to respond to that because I did listen to a Wisconsin Association of School Boards webinar on Friday, which dealt with those very issues, and that has been recorded so you can access it at the WASB website. But they very clearly, and they had two of the attorneys from WASB on there, said that we can access information about the status of vaccination of our staff, that it is legal. It has to be treated very confidentially. And also that the attorneys there believe that we could mandate vaccination if we so desired. Or we could offer incentives if we wanted to, for people to be vaccinated on the staff.
So then we'll go to the Supreme Court and ask what our our school legal counsel says.
I spoke with Mary Gerber. She said for research purposes and planning purposes, you can find out if your staff have been vaccinated or not, but you should not broadcast the number or share that information. But she said for planning purposes, you may. I asked her school nurse to look up those numbers, and she said she was denied by her boss to do that process. So the next step would be to survey our staff and see how honest folks are on that survey or not. I think it would be, and we can do the same process with the students if we would like to. Maybe a simple survey. I'm sure Stephen can figure it out. Thanks, Stephen.
I'd like to ask my friends from the hospital. 3 or 4 years ago, when we had a big outbreak of influenza, okay, and so we required flu shots for everybody, and if they didn't, they had to wear a mask, right? So there was no big, we knew who had flu shots, we knew who didn't have flu shots. And I just don't know if it's as big of a legal issue as we think it is. If we require, as a working here, that you have to have this, other than for health reasons or religious reasons.
Right. That's been our policy ever since. So
Yeah,
every year, that's our policy for the flu shot, and as of this year, it's our policy for the COVID.
Yeah.
Mr. Wolfen, you had a question?
Well, I don't know, like, mandatory or make them, I think that is overreaching what the president has proposed. I mean, you know, getting fired, kids, that seems a little harsh, I think. But I personally would, rather than penalizing somebody and firing them, like, is there a way we can incentivize or find out what percent we're at, and then maybe reward those people that have already done it, and then offer a carrot to the ones that haven't?
I can have those.
Maybe people that already got to get $100.
I can have
people
those.
that
I can have
haven't, give them 50 if they
a
can.
survey. Stephen I can throw out a survey, and we can have that information for next month if you want. Or a special meeting in between, sure.
Or tie it to if you don't get it. I mean, that's getting very complicated, but they run the risk of higher health insurance. Like, should they, you charge a smoker more for their policy? I mean, if you're running the risk of not being vaccinated, maybe you're posed with higher healthcare risk. And I don't know. I'm just, rather than making it, you have, you know, I like the.
Well, if we fire staff for not getting vaccinated, we're gonna have a hard time.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If we're proposing to
We'll be
make
short.
it mandatory, to me that sounds like it's mandatory. When I hear mandatory, that means you have to have it. So if you don't have it, what is the recourse?
Does the hospital know your percentage of your staff? They want to share it.
Yeah, so prior to mandating vaccine, we were 83%. We now set a November 30th deadline for our staff to receive the vaccine. But our policy is actually similar to what Keith is suggesting.
If we were at 83%, we would staff.
I mean, you're in healthcare, we're a public school, so I mean, we're.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we're not.
Refresh me, what is the, sorry, I would follow them all the time. What's the mandate and what is the law for the 100, if you're over 100, they're mandated to have by the president.
I didn't pay a lot of attention to it because
That
I
is
don't agree with
garbage.
it.
You're over 100 employees.
And what is the consequence if you're not, as an organization?
I don't know if the consequence
I
of
don't
the
know.
organization.
And has it been challenged by anybody or did it just?
It's going to be.
I think by the time that works its way out through the courts, that's why I would propose maybe more incentive.
Regarding vaccination, one of you said earlier you wanted to work with us on a targeted vaccination program. What could you do to help educate our students and parents and staff on the benefit of vaccination, the risk of vaccination? Do you have thoughts, ideas on that, or?
No concrete ideas, but the things you're suggesting are the same kinds of things that I was thinking of. Education related, making it easily available, you know, at school events or whatever the case may be. We're open to partnering with you on ways that you think might help.
So is it clear that it's up to our county health department to actually operate a vaccination clinic outside, let's say, for instance, in school? Historically, as we all know, that has happened before.
I don't think it's hard to get a vaccine right now.
Well, I mean,
It's not hard to get a
is
vaccine.
what capacity do you feel that Door County has to handle the extra if you know, if it's approved, if the vaccination is approved for children as well.
Oh, I think they'll be vaccinated very quickly, within weeks.
So there wouldn't be any problem with, I mean, you don't see any problem dealing with, even with the third dose vaccination, that's probably,
Yeah, so the third dose, we're still waiting for more information about that, and that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, because if it comes out that it's recommended for folks 8 months after they've received their second dose, for the vast majority in our community, we're coming up on 8 months right about now for those first people in the community who received the second dose. If it comes out that it's 6 months, then you're looking at 3 months worth of vaccinated individuals who are ready for that booster shot on the same day.
Right.
And that could create a backlog and shortage issues and that sort of thing. So a lot of it depends on how the regulation comes out and how quickly the state can get us the supply once we get it.
So logistically, I mean, I think what they're looking at is getting this booster shot approved before they give a final approval for the children. Well, so it doesn't have a massive vaccination surge.
Yeah, I don't know if we know that for sure. I mean, this date September 20th has been thrown out, but that's next week, and obviously we still don't have an answer.
So so a question of the floor is encouraging vaccination something we should,
Because
there is that personal choice, so do we,
So my
do we
only
encourage
question
that
is, if I
vaccination?
may, with this awesome team here, is, and what's your opinion, and maybe the legal opinion? So, I'm a big numbers guy too, so I use statistics all the time. And I use statistics all the time until you are a statistic, right? So generally for the VAERS database, generally more people are using it, and generally it is safe, I would agree. I'm a big vaccination guy. My family's got all vaccinations except my youngest 2 kids haven't gotten this yet. But the fact is, it does affect some people. And I know very firsthand of somebody who's been affected by his medical staff in California. They assess that the vaccine is what's affected him. His heart, he had heart issues. He's still working through it. He's struggling. He's seen all kinds of experts, and thank God he does very well financially because he's doing things I can't afford to do. So that's the mandate problem I have. Are we liable then? Because we're saying, you got to do this, right? So that,
When they produced the vaccines, Trump made it, it's impossible for you to sue the
okay.
drug.
Because that's the problem with mandate. Now, I love the educational thing. That's what I always try to do, is educate people, talk to the smart people, and stay off of social media, by the way, that's the one rub with mandate, is let's educate people, make them informed, but they might, and by the way, there might be a doctor who advises that individual based on their complex medical situation, do not get a shot. So they're going to have to wear a mask. And
So, before we talk about mandate, this is not an action item, but does this, if the board wished, would this school board like the medical faculty from the hospital to provide us with informational material for our parents and students on the benefits or detriments of vaccination? Or do we not want to engage in that education?
I think information, well, for me personally, if you're asking, information is great, but I think we're not going to ram it down in his throat. I think they should have.
No, you can't ram it down their throat, it's their personal choice, but do we want that next step? Do we want that next step of information from them to disseminate to our public?
I think that would be fine. Now, I'm going to take a totally different position, okay? This is going to surprise everybody. If we didn't mandate polio shots, or then it went from Salk to Sabin, there was no questions of it at all, and it's been eradicated almost from the entire world. Polio does not exist anymore because everybody across the world got inoculated or herd immunity. It doesn't exist. I personally have a hard time saying it's okay for the people who work with kids, because we just have this issue here with all these students out. One way of making sure to at least have fewer students out is that you're going to stop the track from teachers and staff to the students.
Masking would have done that too,
No, it would not, no.
to a degree.
But it's not that certain. This is certain. This is certain.
No, it's totally, I have a
Okay.
question.
Science is
Totally
that-
unavoidable and certain do not exist in this scenario. Please correct me if I'm wrong. This is not totally unavoidable, because even with masks and vaccinations, you
Yes.
can wear them.
That's true.
And so
That's
let's
true.
not say
That's-
these words.
that's true.
Always and never should never be used.
Okay, I take that back. But it has, it's a proven huge impact. Yes, every vaccine that we've taken as kids, whether it's smallpox, whether it's polio, whether it's diphtheria, whether it's mumps, I didn't take mumps because that was after my time. I had mumps, got it in Mexico at 6. But anyway, they all have, none of them are perfect. Somebody gets sick, somebody may die. But you have to look at the benefit to the entire community. All right? For somebody to come up, I find it fascinating, and it's on an editorial. For years and years and years, we had no problems with kids getting measles, mumps, rubella, and diphtheria, and polio, and all that stuff. That was fine. It was accepted. You just had it. You couldn't go to school. We had nobody out there protesting that I had my right to have my kid get polio, right?
What year did we have polio vaccine?
Well, in 1953, I was in the 50s.
So I
Long time ago.
Well, the only thing I would offer is, over time, confidence grows in anything new. And because of the massive misinformation not being done here, the distrust was driven into our community, everywhere. Not by anybody in this room, by the way. But yet we now have faced it. I mean, people are attacking me because I'm terrible with kids. And anybody who knows me, that's crap. So the fact I would question this and that BARS database, the longer we do this, the confidence will be built. But the fact is, the fear was it was this manufactured vaccine, it was super fast. I've supported it throughout the process, but you have to recognize that some people are not on board with their confidence in this free country yet. We're getting there, and that's what the information and education, and the longer we do it, the more people you vaccinate, and even right now, because on that point, our medical community, which is the greatest in the world, I believe, have forever made up billions of dollars on our bad decisions. Heart disease, too much drinking, all this stuff. And so in one concept, why is COVID differently? Because it's overwhelming our country and it's a problem. I get it.
But if you want to go
But
on,
once it's, whatever the fancy word he said, that it's like the flu, we'll just live with it. Some of us will get a COVID shot every
but
year.
if you want to go to your safari in Uganda, you have no problems with taking your yellow fever shots. Yellow fever shots.
I do stuff like that.
No, but you would.
When I deploy with the military, I stand up and they shoot me with a whole bunch of crap. That's a fact.
Anyway, that's for another day. That was
So
I agree with Richard.
I think.
is this, this is not an action item, is this an item the board wishes to have back on the agenda next month for action? Either to mandate or not?
Yes.
Well, I don't like the word mandate, but I think we could discuss maybe some other ways of encouragement.
He won't have it done by next month. You guys can get it done in a month's time, the president can't.
And that's not good. That's not about the Supreme Court.
We're going to put this back on the agenda for next month for discussion of possible action. It will be, as Keith said, some ideas on incentives, some ideas
Education incentive.
on information, and further discussion on vaccination. Does that sound all right to everyone?
Yes.
Okay. We're going to go back to new business.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
At one point, you got Mr. Wright to take back something he said. I've never seen that. It's fascinating.
It is.
I've learned a lot by sitting by this young man.
Okay, we're going to move on to new business and the retirement announcement of Tammy Desatel. I'm sorry, we should go back to the administrator reports. Mr. Phillips?
Thank you very much. Just a couple highlights from my report that was presented to you or provided to you. First off, one of the challenges we're facing this year, it's a good challenge with growing into the new building. and the staff is doing an excellent job being flexible. Just little things that you don't anticipate, and making sure that things go well, so our students are having a good experience. Also wanted to draw attention, I mentioned a book that I'm working on reading, and that is Disrupting Poverty. We've talked before, one of the things that I've always seen as a challenge is trying to make sure that our socioeconomically disadvantaged group is taken care of, and that particular book will help shed some light on some of those things. And then the last one, I really appreciate the staff, their willingness to participate. I think it's an exciting thing to be able to present to the kids and send out to our families as the start of the year video that we do. And it was a lot of fun to be able to put that together.
Thank you.
I'll try to be quiet for the rest of the night, but I walked over to Aaron and I congratulated him. I said, your last challenge, working with socioeconomically disadvantaged children. I said, you hit it a ball out of the park. Of anything that we can do, that's an area I think we need to focus on. I think it's an area we need to actually maybe have a special committee on, working with the faculty of how we can program this. It's easy, but it's difficult. The goal is if you can get kids to read at the 5th grade level, maybe. I mean, and then by 7th grade, get them to be able to do math. If they can do those two things, they will probably have a much better chance of being successful in life than without. And I grew up with a, quote, silver spoon in my mouth, but social economic disadvantages exist, and from being a middle class person to being a kid coming from a poverty situation carries a whole other ramifications of problems. And I think we as an institution are almost duty bound to see how we can break through this with respect to certain simple things like reading and math, and put together a task force, because I think it's very, very important, and it's something schools can do. We have the power to do it. It's not easy, but those two areas that just concentrate on reading and math, so that when they leave here, they have a competency level. They're going to be able to deal with some of the other issues of their social economic disadvantages. So.
I think some of that work is underway already. They are addressing it. The committee, whatever we want to call it, equity, culture, whatever committee is, that is, I think, like Cindy, so I think that's something that committee would address.
Right.
I disagree, because it's going to get lost in all the political hubbub of equity.
Jared, I'm going to cut you off because I think we got it. We had Beth Vandehey come from CISA 7 in service. We just spoke as an admin team today about having her come back October 1st or October 20th. We're going to continue working on this. I want to see at the high school level our clubs, organizations, athletic teams reach out to those underprivileged children and grab them. And I think our whole team has the same concept, and I think we're on it. And we've beefed up our ELL program the last 3-4 years with the staffing, and so we're busting on it, I think.
That's great. What I'm just saying, I'd like to see it come onto our agenda somewhere in an ongoing report, maybe quarterly, of what's going on, what's being implemented, and what the results are. That's all I'm saying, that we focus that issue.
And I think when we have our goal setting for the board, we make that one of our goals and go from there.
Okay.
Yep.
But there is work being done already.
But again, congratulations. Thank you very much. Excellent.
I have a question. Shriels, I just wanted to, and Adam, it may apply to you as well. As I was coming into the school board meeting tonight, there were a number of students that were sitting outside waiting for transportation. And I said, how do you like the new school? And one of the students said, I hate it. And I said, well, why is that? And he said, because my schedule is all screwed up. And I laid this out only as an issue that as we think about the transition of these students into the new building and the new environment. We can't, I'm sure, I'm preaching to the choir, I know that, but we can't underestimate the stress imposed when schedules and routines are changed. And I think that's what he was trying to tell me, is that his whole world just kind of changed. And he was so rude and into structure that because of the new environment and the changing rooms, and I don't know, I didn't quite grasp if he had classes that changed and had to be moved because of the new building or whatever, but I just laid that out as a for administration to maybe debrief that. It was just one student. I was just surprised.
Do you think he was a high school student? Or junior student? I'm just not sure a screwed up schedule would directly relate to the building, but what you said is that's very important.
It would be interesting that would be 21 questions with that student, is the building, because every year we hear about students who are not happy with their schedule because we have this limited way that we can schedule classes, and there are often students that feel
No one likes
their
going
schedule
from
is
Mr.
screwed up.
Phillips' room to the band room. No one's ever like that. You know, I mean.
Anyway, so for what it's worth.
I don't know what the
Mr. Baird.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate that feedback because it's important in our conversations, and I've been meeting with our staff on a regular basis, and I've notified them all that it's important that we meet and talk about those changes. It is a unique year, and I did kind of highlight that in my report, just in my opening paragraph, by saying I had seniors that didn't know where their classes were. I had to ask, where do I go? Because our classrooms changed for everybody, so it did turn their world upside down, and the first week was very hectic. Probably the most hectic that I've experienced, because I wasn't even considering the fact that our most experienced students would have anxiety walking into the building not knowing where to go. And we're talking about seniors who come in with confidence most times. So that was unique for us, and I've been monitoring closely. We're only in our 8th day of school, but I met with my middle school team Tuesday, I believe, and that was my first question is, talk to me, tell me how our kids are doing. It really felt like they were settling in. Haven't had a chance to be with my whole high school team yet, but I met with individual teachers, of course, and the teachers are saying, gosh, I really like the new layout, where our rooms are located, the schedules that we have in place, but yet it's not an 8th day of school, so I appreciate that very much. But it really has been that, and then we also have an additional 30 new students in our building in the secondary school, which is a tremendous amount of new faces. We have some new staff. So there has been a bigger transition issue than most. In that time, though, in that 8 days, we're also planning homecoming activities, and we started that conversation with our students. Just wanted to share with the board that we do plan some of the traditional activities that we've done in the past with them. And I know the students are excited. I met with the senior class or those interested in planning homecoming on Monday. And we are looking at hall decorating, a pep assembly, and a homecoming dance. But we're hoping to have it at the town park, and we have said that it's appropriate for us to have it in our pavilion area, so it'll be an outside dance. And we're also looking at some live music, so we can just sit and enjoy the live music versus the traditional dance. So that's exciting. And then the seniors are also excited to paint their parking spots, which Mr. Lakey has approved. The challenge that I wanted to present, though, today came from a few different places. But it was a broad discussion at our Packer Principal Conference meeting yesterday. And that is, we have an extreme shortage of game officials. We not only have a shortage of game officials, but we have a shortage of coaches. It's very hard for us to recruit and maintain coaches. And then we also have a shortage of game workers. And we talked as a conference, and all schools were experiencing the same thing. This isn't a local problem. It is a local problem, but it's also a state problem in Wisconsin. And WIA met earlier this week or last week. Mr. Lakey was part of that meeting where this was a pretty big discussion. But the numbers of officials have gone down, so we're really trying to pinpoint as a conference, as a local school district, steps that we need to take. We do believe it has to do with how these folks are being treated, how they're being recognized and appreciated. We think that there are a lot of educational pieces that we can do, proactive steps that we can take to make them part of our communities or part of our schools. We think that more recruiting is necessary.
So we have spearheaded this as a conference, and we've been meeting on it actually not just recently, but it was a broader conversation at yesterday's meeting, only because the number of certified officials in Wisconsin has gone down 34%, Mr.
In the
Whitney?
last 2 years.
In the last 2 years. So, you know, we've been talking about this, but we're going to make it a focus. Our December meeting is going to be specifically on those 3 parts because those athletic opportunities are important to our kids. And we are already canceling games, or moving games, changing our schedule. For example, all of our softball, baseball games will be double headers this year, so there will no longer be a home and away against Gibraltar. It'll all be away or all be home, only because we don't have enough officials to meet represent our parades. Here locally, I was hoping that the audience would stay. We've got some of the audience, but I want to make an appeal here locally. If anybody's interested in officiating, hopefully we can sign you up. But more urgently, we need game workers at our games. Mrs. Tank does a wonderful job recruiting folks, but we never have enough. We need coaches. So it is an important part of our programming, and I just wanted to say that's a challenge that I want to work on along with many others. But on that, I want to share. Thank you. Any questions?
If somebody did want to be a rep, you could help them.
Yeah, there are
Get them on
programs.
this path to that.
Yeah, I've talked to NWTC about offering coursework for them. They don't think that they would have enough interest here locally to do that on our campus in certain
I
days.
mean, is it a test you take or what? Or I mean, you need a thing for like basketball and a thing for rest? I mean, or once you're certified, you can do any sport or what?
There's some training that's required
Yeah,
for
there's
sport.
You have to be certified, whatever sport you do, you have to take a test every year for each sport that you do. Once you get to the higher levels of level 5 and master, then you have to sometimes take 2 tests. To get started, basically all you need is a recommendation or your card signed by an athletic director or another official. Send your registration into WIA and you are an official. The best way to get games is to be a member of an association. And Mrs. Tank has also approached me and asked me if I would be willing to do mentorships and I guess basically instruction, especially for baseball, softball, and basketball officials. Because I did baseball and softball for 20 years. I did basketball for almost 20 years. So what I told what I do.
Yeah, and this isn't a new problem. I don't know if you remember, but about 2 years ago, we offered a course here at Sevastopol for our high school kids, and Paul Spooty led it. And we brought kids into meeting with him, and then he would mentor those kids as they did youth games. And that was outstanding. So we did do that with Paul Spooty 2 years ago. We got some high school kids to officiate some younger grade levels, but they didn't advance through. But it's not just the officials. I mean, you know, we need good coaches. The average stay for some of these folks is 2 years or less. They tell their kids don't stay. Yeah.
I think the issue isn't passing the test. I think the issue is you have to have a thick skin, whether you're a coach or a ref. Because,
Parents are crazy. Whether you're a coach or a ref, I mean,
yeah. Any other
Yeah, I
questions
do.
for Mr. Bear?
For homecoming, I've got some rumblings from kids and my kids about Mr. Sevastopol. And my question is, I'm told that we can't have that, and if that is the case, why is that? I guess that surprised me a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate that question. Mr. Sevastopol, we've discussed it as a staff, and it's become a behavior problem, some of the events in Mr. Sevastopol. So we still do some of the activities. There's an academic decathlon. Those are still part of what we call now Point Olympics. So that's something that we will continue to do. The other thing is there was gender equity concerns because we only had a Mr. Sevastopol, we didn't have a Mrs. Sevastopol. And we didn't involve as many kids in that event because it would happen 5 days a week. And we felt like, you know, we should involve as many kids as we possibly can. And so that's one of the decisions that we've made together as a faculty team in advising our kids. And it really comes down to some of the behaviors that we saw, which were not appropriate for our school.
Did you talk to the kids about those behaviors?
Well, you know, I didn't have an opportunity. I didn't know that there were questions. I did talk to them about our concerns initially. The senior class, they asked a question, and I said, you know, this is a decision our faculty made. This is why, I gave them a brief description. I said, any other questions? I said, it's really important we're on the same page. And that was it.
So there's discipline issues, I didn't hear that. I guess my only question is my understanding is this. Discipline issues need to be handled. I support that. My understanding, with my kids going through here, it served as a kind of a positive thing. So have a Mrs. Sevastopol. Do both. If they want to have, are there people that would do it? Because my understanding, and you know, I had kids graduating, you know that, I mean, so I didn't know there's discipline issues, but those can be handled, and you know, I love discipline. But I don't, the downside, I hope, is big, because the upside was big. They loved it, it rallied the troops, it spirit, so I guess if, and that's part I'm gonna learn from this equity thing. My fear is, we're afraid, so we're gonna stop everything, because I don't know how to fix this, but let's stop everything else. And that's why I asked the question here in our meeting, because that's what it seems like to me. And I wanna question that. I mean, to our kids, why are we penalizing our kids when I don't mind adding stuff with Title 10 or whatever. My daughter benefits greatly from sports, right? So I'm glad they started all the programs and stuff. So let's start a Mrs. Sevastopol if they're interested. Whatever the right miss, I'm sorry, yeah. Wouldn't that be the better first step than to just cancel?
Well, we haven't canceled it, we're just not going to.
Yeah, you did.
We're still doing activities to Pioneer Olympics.
You canceled Mr. Let's talk about the reality.
Yeah.
You canceled Mr. Sevastopol.
All right, let Mr. Bear and I work on that. I don't think that's at the board level, that we have Mr. Sevastopol.
It sets the tone of our school.
What I'm hearing is you would like to see a Mr. Sevastopol, and for a gender point of view, we also then would have to offer a Miss Sevastopol, and I think we could organize something that would be a competition for Mr. and Miss Sevastopol, and have it so that we can have some behavior of the students is appropriate for a school.
My concern with it is this. Okay, have a Miss Sevastopol, whatever you want to call that, but that it's taken away from the kids without any discussion with them, without discussing it with them and saying, here's why we took it away. Can we do something with you to
make it school appropriate?
Keep it appropriate and continue the tradition.
And I want to stay out of your business, but the reason I brought it up at the school board is what is some person's intention, right? You never know that. So the question is, if we're starting to change our school because of all these social pressures, I think the school board does weigh in on that. That's why I brought it up.
Okay.
That's why I think, and so
I think Mr. Bear's concern is when a kid gets the microphone or gets the platform out there, you don't know which direction they're going to go. I always get worried about guest speakers, because what are they going to say, right? So I got it. What we're going to do is we're going to frame it up and run a Mr. and Miss and Mr. competition that's appropriate for school. We'll figure it out.
Well, if someone says something inappropriate, can we handle that right away?
I would hope so.
And it stops, and then the next class realizes they shouldn't.
I would hope so.
So you're certain that,
I think we could pull it off.
so
It's not that big.
you're certain, I'm picking up, you're certain that half the school would be very offended if we just had Mr. Sevastopol.
It doesn't matter.
I mean,
It doesn't matter what the kids
they-
think. We got to be fair to everybody.
Well,
We'll be fair.
so all those years we weren't fair.
Well, that's what happened with sports during the 60s. That's why our boys' locker room is twice the size of the girls' locker room, yes.
This is a social event, you know?
Why are we discussing?
That's why I said I thought we were going to go on, but I think we got it.
Because it's a direction, it's a direction for our school.
And it's been going on a long time.
Really, it's not on the agenda at all.
Homecoming, it was the homecoming question.
Okay.
And we're getting into.
Let's move on to the next one. We got it. And then admin will handle it. You'll see it'll turn out great.
If I can just say one last thing, we have done so many things to celebrate our kids, and our kids have had a lot of fun, and we're not trying to take anything away from them. These activities are being folded into Pioneer Olympics and the PEP Assembly, and they're still going to be part of our school event, and we're going to have a fun time.
And make sure that they are included in the planning, that it's not just.
So you can
planning.
say that, but that's not what the kids in this building are saying, sir.
Well,
Okay.
All right, let's go on with the meeting. You guys can discuss it afterwards.
Yeah, let's move
We'll
on.
go home at some point tonight.
I just want to start by, saying that I can't believe it's only been 8 days of school. It's like a fast and furious start to a school year. It's been challenging. It's been, amazing to watch the staff. I want to recognize the
you know, the continuation of the pivoting that needs to happen and the changes that happen. So it's been really awesome to see the, you know, the capacity and the care is still there. You know, I also want to highlight, you know, the new staff that have come into Sevastopol have done a really wonderful job getting with their teams and learning, you know, the Sevastopol culture and way and jumping in where they can. So it's been pretty incredible. The thing that I'm looking forward to is that we're talking about in-service already. So our second in-service is starting on is October 1st. And some of the things that we're going to still continue to work on are the work that we did with Beth Vandehei on our summer in-service about equity and inclusion in the classroom. So we're going to continue that discussion. And the second piece that we're going to look at and begin our, I guess, journey on or discussion on is just dyslexia awareness and how to adequately start that by beginning the conversation to allow our staff to understand what it is and how to recognize it with the long-term goal of implementing some strategies to make sure that all kids are successful. And that's all I have. Is there any questions?
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Livier there on the athletic, or Ms. Margraf on the athletic director's report and the G&T report?
The only comment I have to say, after looking through all the scheduling that broadcast do, I think it's one of the most underappreciated positions. I look at, for a week's activities, how many things have been scheduled?
I think everybody, well, perhaps people don't understand what she does, but anybody that has done, have been here and done it and worked under that schedule, totally appreciates her.
Yeah, Mr. Hiltz, former athletic director.
Yeah, I described it once as being a wedding planner for the school I was at. We had about 400 events over the course of the year, and making sure that each one of those goes off well. And if it does, nobody notices that you have any part in that particular thing. And I think she does a nice job.
If the wheels fall off, everyone knows it's
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. I remember the.
We Sunday in the future have a discussion about all assignment replacement. But like, you know, we used to have other help. And I'm not asking yet, I'm just throwing that out because it was brought up that someday maybe we should think about that. And we do like the results, and just like we're finding right now, should we burn our staff out? So different discussion.
We may find ourselves there something.
Maybe.
We've had some preliminary talks at the end of the team.
The superintendent's report.
Everything I've got is already someplace else.
I don't have anything. Committee reports. The communication committee met yesterday. The fall newsletter is underway until the end of October. We are talking about trophy retention and displays such as moving the Blue Ribbon Award to a permanent spot within the 2020-21 edition, and how long awards other than state level competitions are kept, and we'll have more on that later. And also, as a note, Dave Phillips has kept all of the old Pioneer Times newsletters since 2008, and those will be uploaded to the website. And they're interesting pieces. Karen Brower is going to go through them and pick some interesting topics to post on Facebook as throwbacks. So good for Dave. That's it on communications. Athletics?
We're trying to set up a meeting. We were going to meet.
Yep, Town Park.
27th and 29th this month, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll have something to report next.
Budget?
Budget, yeah. Okay. Fund balance, we're sitting with cash on hand at $5.7 million. Last year it was 5.3 in August. You can see on Fund 46 is at $933,000. That'll depreciate over this school year as we work on the track project. I don't know anything else you want to highlight.
So I've got it.
Okay.
Well, I would say this is probably the hardest audit I've had since I've been here. Not that there was any issues, it was tough. The annual report is almost done. It's just some things I gotta work through the auditor with. And next month, we will have to be setting it at the levy next month. So Mr. McGee and I will be going to a meeting in Stevens Point for that, and then we set the levy and get the information out to the municipalities.
We're projecting our mill rate to be less than last year.
Yep.
Does the auditor make a presentation to the board?
The auditor will be here probably, we haven't said, don't know exactly when, it'll probably it'll be November or December. I'm thinking probably December, and then we're looking at moving the audit up to get it away from the first week of school or that time frame. So we're looking at trying to get the audit the first week in August. Now that I'm more versed in what I'm doing. Because they wanted to do that 4 years ago, and I said, no, I'm not ready.
I'm betting it'll be December.
Probably.
Just looking at the dates.
As you do the budget, as the association, as the state giving you guidance with, since the consumer price index hit 5% last month, it's really going to have we just had this big discussion at TC 2 days ago. It's really wrecking havoc. And then we're going to have to go into our reserves to cover some of the costs that are going crazy right now.
Jerry, when does their financial year start?
There's 3 hours start.
So are they July 1 like the school district?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When do they hand out their raises to their staff? Okay. 85% of your budget's staffing.
Right.
That is
Some of the building costs and equipment costs are going crazy. Good thing you built building.
If there's nothing else, if there's anything else on budget, move to facilities.
All right, for this building, we still have flooring in the 1965 hallways, cafeteria, in the back half of the face room. It was supposed to be shipped on Monday the 13th. We don't know that that's true because we're not going to give an arrival date of that furniture for that flooring. The parking lot, we're thinking about laying the asphalt the week of October 4th. The curbs are going in now. There's some disagreement about the handicap ramp between the building inspector and the engineer that does, what do you call it, the surveyors.
Oh.
So they're working through that, so that's kind of got them, you can't build unless you know what you're building. And yeah, I thought that could have been something that been done months ago, but whatever.
It's just, how quick are they reporting back on it?
Every day there's emails going back and forth about, what about this, what about that, and they argue about it. Yeah, so I don't know much about that, but I know they'll get it straight in the end. So that's about it. I don't know, we're trying to figure out this building yet.
How long after the thing is poured before we get that parked cars on there? Is that a 2-week thing or a 7-day or don't know?
It has to sit for a few days, but we also have to have the lines painted, so you gotta let the paint guy come in too.
What exciting to get the parking lot.
Right, I am excited to get more of that too. I'm tired of the noise outside the office. Yeah. And then that all the busing too.
Signage, like, are there going to be signs, like, where are they all going to be?
The outside
To help
rooms and
direct,
stuff. Every room will have a sign
no,
outside.
I meant on the road signage. Like is there Pilgrim's Way?
Is there a
gonna be
plan to
big
add signs?
Sevastopol school sign, or is there going to be? I was thinking as I was driving in tonight again, it's like, okay, if I were just coming to Door County the very first time and wanted to know where Sevastopol was.
So nothing, yeah, because we had the letters on the outside of the 1924 section, and now we don't have anything on the front that says Sevastopol.
Well,
I thought
I'm just curious.
down by the road, what is that road down there?
Rip Road.
I kind of envisioned a nice big sign by Rip Road, so all our visitors could know, turn here. And then when you get down to Pioneer Road, and it's probably not part of the building, we just have to knock that. That's part of the maintenance.
Building grounds and committees have to get together.
Yeah, there you go.
Those guys.
Yeah. Is that what you were thinking? Because I love that idea.
Because now when you go on 57, you don't know what's our school. The Everett Roberts sign will still be there, but that doesn't say Sevastopol. That just got moved over 6 feet.
Or out of county sport teams are gonna have to drive in, and they're gonna wonder, like, where do I turn to go into Sevastopol?
Right. If anything, so you don't have to pay anything, I think the county needs to put in some county, green and white sign that says Sevastopol.
Take it on.
That's
And let them people. Huh?
That's DOT.
Oh, okay. DOT.
But I mean, the town of Sevastopol owns that plot of land where you're thinking about putting a sign, so we have to have some kind of
Building and grounds.
That's a good goal for there.
We'll bring it to the town,
Put you right on it.
Anything you want to point out legislatively, Sue?
Just very quickly, in interest of time, if you are planning to go to the WASB regional meeting, ours is on October 6th, there will be a mask mandate. There will be a need for proof of vaccination or else a negative COVID test within 72 hours of the event. And if you wish to attend just the meeting and not the meal, you would not have to have the vaccine requirement, but if you plan to eat, you must have that. And there will be a legislative update at that meeting. There's a lot going on in the state legislature now, including some very contentious discussion about the new approach that's proposed for reading, which has a lot of mandates to it. And of course, they are not funded mandates as it stands currently, and it is rather onerous for school districts to have to undertake all of these things. And WASB's point is we need to be concerned about reading, but this is not the way to do it. So just a heads up on that taking place in Madison as we speak, actually. That's all I have.
I skipped past the field project.
Grass was planted in September 1, it's up and growing. The track has been rubberized, the press box the press box part's up with bleachers. I don't know if they've been delivered or being installed. And that's about it.
But the grass is
The well's
planted.
in, the well's in, you can't drink from it yet because it hasn't passed testing, yes. But the
Good. No, I was worried about the grass. 'Cause that ain't-
grass is,
We're running out of growing time for soccer.
it's beautiful weather right
Supposed to
now.
be easy.
We'll let the soccer team on the spring that's
That's
good
what we're
enough to
hoping.
do it,
Come
yes.
on.
All right.
Okay, so I think it's prudent that we just start looking at a time that we can do some board goal setting based on what we heard in this WASB presentation tonight, simply toward getting in order for the superintendent evaluation and doing a good job of that. It talked about, we should look at his job description again. It talked about, of interest to me was using student data in our goal setting. So, do you want to try to do that in October? Start it in October?
Sure.
Well, just do what?
What?
October, your birthday?
October.
You want to propose something? And this will be just goal setting. We're not going to try to wrap any other meetings into this because we do that and then we don't spend time on goal setting.
Are you looking for a Thursday night, or what night are we looking for?
We're looking for a night when everybody can come.
It's the 13th of October, a Wednesday, okay?
Wednesdays are the best.
That's the board.
All right, how about the 20th though? That'd be back-to-back nights, so. I'm trying to stay away from Tuesdays because in middle school football, I want to go see a game. And I'd like to see cross country on a Thursday, so.
Wednesday works for me.
But
Wednesday the 20th?
that's only back-to-back nights, so.
What time?
20?
Whatever we don't have.
After
City, can you make the
Thursday.
You can. Thanks for keeping him.
Thursday.
Oh.
It's my goal.
Okay.
But any other time in October.
I'm better for the first week of October.
First week, they're okay?
6th of October.
No, I'm in Stevens Point, over there. How about the 7th? Seventh works.
Yeah,
That's
Tuesday,
okay.
yeah.
Seventh, the seventh.
On the 7th.
October 7th?
It's on Thursday.
I don't, whatever, I mean,
All right, what time? Was that better?
I just kind of focused on volleyball, tell my
Right,
guys
right.
why I'm a single.
I like football, you like volleyball.
I like long walks.
What about October 27th? What about October 27th?
Oh, it just
Good.
October 27th?
That does not work for me.
We're not going to get a night when everybody can come. That's awesome.
If you guys can do it, I mean, just, can everyone do it the 7th? I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
7th it is, and if people can't come, then.
There it is, okay. What time?
6 o'clock?
6 o'clock,
6 o'clock,
Great.
because that's probably a couple hours.
Sure.
No, we're staying till midnight.
No more than
Got it
2.
all hashed
No
out.
more than 2.
We're going to talk about COVID over there.
No!
That's a non-COVID meeting.
Can we write that on the board?
COVID-free.
Kyle, I would find it helpful, since I've never done goal setting in an educational setting, would you bring some examples of goals from your previous, from other places in your previous?
We have build one off the board.
Well, we have goals from 2018, and then we had the 3 pillar goals for this year. But those don't necessarily go around using student data, et cetera. So I'm sure Mr. Luke can help us, guide us in that.
Lisa?
Lisa,
Can I ask for clarification? Are administrators part of the goal setting?
I think so.
Because we need to
Or you
make
just
sure
want
that
to
the
be
7th still works
Yeah,
for us.
right.
I think, personally, I think this time it would be the board because we need to kind of get all our ducks in a row for this evaluation part. I'm sure we're not going to have all the student data to look at. We might have some initial discussion and then I don't see goal setting as a one-time shot, one time this year. I see it.
You
in
threw her off the
October.
hook for the 7th, is what I heard.
Maybe another one in the winter after the holidays to
Just one clear.
to refine things.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Unless you feel they need to be there as would be.
Well, I go to another street.
Everyone was there. All right.
I'm gonna work out the high level stuff.
I would agree.
But she's saying it's going to be just on my evaluation point.
I think there's a lot of work on this evaluation process for us to do.
That's where she's focusing. You're
To
thinking
start.
more goals.
Start
So we're going to do two, we're going to combine these two.
Yeah, I didn't know, wouldn't we just goal setting first? And then that should be first. We've been struggling with that forever.
Right.
Fine tune what we got, and then go into the.
Well, if it's going to be board goals, then the admin team should be a part of it
That's right.
too.
And I would
How is the
recommend that
7th
the admin team provides us with some
We have
draft.
an MWTC event at 6 o'clock. So
What kind of event is it?
I mean, we have to access. The evaluation process is a whole different.
It's a whole other thing. There are things that we need to do to prepare for that before we start
No,
that process
I
in
can't,
December.
we can't, none of us can access that without.
We'll have to, I'll call Cheryl again tomorrow. So if you want to do board goals, have the administrative team talk about here's student data. we'll do
Back to
that.
the calendar.
Let's just do that one.
But then we are going to need to get together and do some planning for the superintendent evaluation at a different time.
7th works for me.
7th of October, okay. Good.
Like he said, not looking naked, so Mr. Barrett's got a meeting, so he's not going to be there, right?
But I think it'd be
Well,
important.
represent us at NWTC that night, that's good.
We'll press it.
Mr. Schultz, you in?
I think so.
All right.
Yes, no to me.
Yes, a maybe, or that works.
And maybe,
Yes,
just from my own experience, I think it'd be much helpful if the administrative staff and you put together draft goals that you want to be considered, and then bring that to the board, and then we discuss it as opposed to starting from scratch. You guys are closer to the action, you understand the lingo, you understand this is your business. You know, this is not our business. So I
You
think.
usually got more than 2 or 3 goals.
Yes, I think you usually have like 4 to 5.
We can't go too, well, I got it, we got it.
I kind of want you guys to set some homecoming goals.
Aaron's already got, we got some already, some of that.
We're good, yeah.
UDL's coming up.
Wait till you're ready.
Yes, I heard that.
We'll move on then to the retirement announcement of Tammy Gessitell. Is there a motion to accept that?
Move to accept the retirement of Tammy Gessitell.
Second. Questions or discussion?
If I could just throw out there, thank you to her for her service. She's does a great job with the kids, the smile on her face and the care that she has for all of her students. It's certainly been noticed in the last 4 years that I've been here and before that, so thank you very much.
Motion carried. Support staff request for use of personal days exception.
And you should have two of them.
Did we vote on that?
I think we did.
No, he did.
No, no votes.
All in favor,
I
say
thought the one was.
aye. Opposed, motion carried. We have two of them.
Yeah, Mary Jackson's came in later.
I didn't get that.
I think that was a separate email.
It came in on the 13th, and Jean had emailed it to you.
Who would like to, which of you would like to speak to the one for Laura Lemke? Mr. Lemke?
Well, the difficulty is she's asking for 2 days after Thanksgiving, and I'm going to parlay Mary Jackson in that. She's asking for 2 days before Thanksgiving. We don't allow personal days before or after a holiday, because if we did, a lot of folks would take them, we'd run out of substitute teachers, so I was denied them. So I have two that are not being approved by administration, so there are options that come to the board. So Laura Lemke's letter you have, I'll read Mary Jackson's if you didn't receive the email or didn't open the email. It says, "Dear Sir, Madam, thank you for taking the time to read this letter. I'm writing this so that the Sevastopol administration and school board can consider requests using my two personal days during the week of Thanksgiving. The 2 days requested are Tuesday the 23rd and Wednesday the 24th. This request falls outside the approved use of personal days since I'm requesting extensive vacation. I would like to explain my request. My husband's a Lutheran pastor. During the school year, break typically happens during major Christian holidays, Christmas and Easter. During those times, my family cannot travel to my husband's location. The only time each school year that my children can see their grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins is during Thanksgiving. This situation is also due to the fact that my extended family lives in Ohio. It is a 9-hour drive each direction to see family, and therefore it's not feasible to travel on a mere 3-day weekend. Perhaps a note is that Lutheran pastors are not given a choice of geography when finishing seminary. Door County is a lovely place to call home. The life of a clergy's family is generally one far removed from family ruts. Due to the pandemic, combined with the lack of a vaccine, we did not see my family last Thanksgiving. Therefore, it would have been 2 years since my children have seen their cousins, aunts, and uncles in Ohio. My children attend a different school district that is giving the week off of Thanksgiving. Therefore, I humbly ask that they travel to Ohio to see my parents, my sister, and their families during this time. I appreciate your consideration of this request. Please let me know if I can clarify any aspect of this letter so you can better understand the situation. Thank you, Mary L. Jackson."
And her position is?
She's aide in the EL department, English language learners.
And so was Laura.
Laura is special education aide. So I just, as an administrator, I'm not going to approve them because I'd end up with a plethora of them and I would end up with more than
Is this like a scenario where that goes into their file and it's sort of one time?
You could do
Or is
that.
this different than that? I mean, because
You could if you want to.
It's not that difficult.
It's just not a practice I want to get into.
Right, no, I understand that.
It's
but I
the 2
never
days
know.
before the it's policy, it's 2 days before
Right, no, I
One is
understand.
2 days after.
the 2 days before, 2 days after the holiday.
And I respect that, I mean, you know best, I mean, but I was just wondering if it was approved or if that would be handled the same way as those other.
This is slightly different. Because we do have those that come
Can I ask a
through,
question?
and that's just using a personal day.
When is the 30-minute discussion part of the meeting?
In the beginning
That was
of the
the
meeting.
beginning.
Oh, the
That
whole
was the-
thing, that was 30 minutes?
No.
I thought there was like an open 30-minute discussion part.
During the public's comments, the first parts are after the pledge. And it can be a maximum of 30 minutes, it can be less than 30 minutes. So, sorry, I've been waiting for something, Kim.
Question I have, I mean, is impact their absence been, as aides,
Mrs. Margraf Alliance gets the substitutes for AIDS, so Mrs. Margraf, how's getting AIDS substitutes met? And what do you think your prediction will be for November?
That's a tough year to ask me that, and last year. Typically, it's okay. Typically, we can cover it. One of the things that the associates do very well at is they plan it ahead of time. So, you know, these requests that come in, oftentimes, and when there is time that associates want off, you know, in my experience working with them, they plan ahead and find that coverage before. So,
You're gonna have this every month, though.
I think the concern comes then, we set this precedent, and we have a lot of teachers that would like to travel during the holiday too, so now we're having teachers ask off.
So what's your recommendation?
I denied it, so my recommendation was no.
So why is it here for the tonight?
Because
That's the chain of command of the school district, Jerry.
It's a policy.
You don't like what the administrator does, it goes to the school board. That's how it works.
I know.
Wow, if you do that in my place, we'd be never doing anything. I recommend that we support the administrator's decision.
I do too, just because we've been consistent. These are hard, I don't like them either.
Yeah.
But it makes, for our school, and it convinces me that educators know their ballgame. Just like when I get deployed, it sucks, but you do it. So that's I think we support you.
one of the things that, you know, I think that one in the conversations that I've had with the associates too is that the part in the handbook can be misleading. And I don't have that information to share with it tonight, but I know that I have been engaged in conversations about how the policy itself can be interpreted in two different ways. So I would think in the future, maybe we can look at that to make sure that that is a crystal clear policy for everybody, so you don't interpret it in a different way. So I think it's a good recommendation and something that we should look at.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion?
Who made the motion?
I did.
Who made the motion? Who seconded?
I made it, he seconded it.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carried. We have 2 early graduation requests. Estes and Cody Heverly, did you want to address those at all, Mr. Bear?
Yeah, I think it's a really positive thing, and I think it's a product of our youth apprenticeship opportunities, or at least a piece of that, which we started just a few years ago to see those students go out and work and really set some life goals and see that through and finish high school early for the benefit of those kids. So I'm fully supportive of the hard work they've done, or they will do, to reach the graduation requirements. Of course, they've got to meet that by semester before we can actually have a graduation.
And that's for both of them, yeah, okay.
Is there a motion to approve the early graduation
I
request?
make a motion to approve the 2 early graduation requests.
Second.
Questions or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. COVID time off for staff.
What is that?
Last school year, the federal government made the ability to offer 2 weeks time off for sick time if they went on a COVID leave. And then it disappeared, and now we still have COVID here. And so some folks, especially if you're the first or second year of the district, you want enough sick days to make it through if you get sent home on quarantine.
Are they vaccinated?
If you're vaccinated, you could stay if you're vaccinated wearing a mask. However, it could be not their choice, it could be their son or daughter
Right.
that causes them to go into the thing.
I understand that, and I guess, I mean, I have mixed feelings on that, like, you know, some employers may allow that, some don't, take the benefit of that. And I'm all for the support of the teachers and whatnot, but, you know, just like we were talking earlier about the vaccination and incentives and, you know, not making it mandatory, but that might be another carrot of, hey, you're vaccinated, it's not free will of your own that you're in a predicament, whether it's their spouse or their kid that prevents them from being here, but that might be another thing to offer, like if you are vaccinated, maybe you get 10 days off or I don't know, I'm just thinking that could be a creative
I know where you're going, yeah, I
I
understand.
think I highly disagree with separating people because of vaccination at this point. I know we're gonna have that discussion forever, but, you know, if somebody, if we're talking and the budget can afford it, the budget risk is acceptable, obviously.
But that, it's 10 days, and
for
a person could have more than one occurrence. For example, we had 4 staff members go have their children tested this week. All of them came back negative, but they missed time off in between, so they missed a couple of days. So doesn't mean like a month from now, one of those children they have may get it, may have to go get tested again. The next time they might be positive. So if they have 10 days here, that should give them
So what are we saying? We're gonna.
I would like to go back to what we did last year, where they had an extra 10 days prorated depending on their hours they work, but basically 2 weeks of paid sick time if it's COVID related, similar to what we did last year.
Any COVID related?
Any COVID, because it could be them, it could be their children, could be their spouse, I don't, yeah, whatever.
I hate
Could you use it to go to Ohio and check out someone with COVID?
Yeah.
I guess if your mother was dying in Ohio, I'd send.
I'm sorry, yeah.
I would.
That's how I am.
Well,
I just want to say this, I mean, being a proponent of vaccination, sometimes people go in for vaccinations and there are some side effects. Would this also cover a person?
That'd be COVID.
Okay.
That'd be COVID related, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Because we did have some people got their second shot or first shot, and
That's an indirect, it's a passive incentive.
Mr. Hookie, on that point, last year, we did not allow people to take COVID days when they went got vaccinated.
if they were sick. They, not to go get the vaccine, but if they
But
got
if they got
sick.
sick because of it, okay.
Yeah, because if they're sick because of it.
There's
yes.
lots of opportunity outside the school day to get vaccinated.
yeah,
Right. That's what we did last year, because when it first came out, the only openings were in Black River Falls. Well, we weren't gonna let someone go to Black River Falls just to get the shot, because then they gotta go 2 weeks later, and that's 2 school days they're missing. That does look crazy, but I don't know.
I would move to approve the superintendent's recommendation of 10 days for COVID-related issues.
Second?
questions or discussion?
Since COVID's never going to go away, this is going to be a permanent policy. So what do we do with,
I mean, what happens next year?
what happens with influenza? If we have bad influenza?
This is only for COVID.
I know, but
Because it's not the C1 class that she talks
Because
about.
the
This
flu-
is by law, we have to
Because
quarantine.
typically with the flu, you don't have to be out 10 days. You'll have
that's
So-
because you're using the word typically.
So when COVID moves down to what Dr. Heiss said, when
I
it comes
just
down
want it
to-
for this year, and I guess I'll cross next year.
We'll cross that
I'm
bridge.
not
We're approving it for 1 year.
And I will add that to my motion
Keith
for
Volkman
the
has a point.
2021, 22 school year.
Keith Volkman has a point.
I was just gonna ask a question, like, when he said where it's a pandemic now, and when it comes down to, like, the cold, I mean, are we gonna do this every year until it comes to that point?
We're doing it through the 21-22
Yeah.
school year.
Because, I
And then
mean,
we'll
I'm
revisit
just
it
saying,
again.
like, when does it end?
We'll deal with that next year.
Just for my education, if they're sick because they've got something else, they've got sick time, right?
Correct.
So why don't you use your sick time? You've got
Family leave and medical.
Because what he just said, if somebody just started, here, they
They
don't have
still
something.
didn't get something else.
Well, that's true about anything. I get hit by a
I
car,
call it
or then I get
question.
appendicitis.
I call it question.
All right.
Please hold.
Repeat the motion, please.
Motion by Ms. Say with a second by Mr. Weidman to approve 10 COVID sick days per person to be used for personal or family member sickness and quarantine for the 2021-2022 school year.
And if somebody feels strongly against that, we are talking about mandatory vaccination and possible incentives. Next month, you could move to rescind the motion. So, roll call vote. Keith?
Keith?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. That concludes our business for the evening. We have that goal-setting meeting on October 7th at 6 p.m. and our regular meeting October 21st at 7 p.m. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I make motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried at
It's 9.
I think I might have left it over there.